The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. The stakes were high, the spotlight shining down on one of the most controversial figures in modern history, Elon Musk. Today, he wasn't the tech mogul who had revolutionized electric cars, or the visionary behind SpaceX's mission to Mars. No, today, he was sitting in the defendant's chair, facing a fierce lawsuit that could shake the very foundation of his empire. The room was filled with murmurs as the judge, a stern middle-aged man with sharp glasses, entered the room. The gavel came down with a heavy thud, silencing the crowd in an instant. The case was about to begin. Elon Musk sat there, calm and collected, seemingly unfazed by the gravity of the situation. His sharp blue eyes scanned the room, making brief contact with his legal team and then turning to the prosecutor. He wasn't the picture of a man on trial for his life, but rather a man who was simply waiting for the game to begin. The plaintiff's lawyer, a tall, imposing figure with a polished suit, stepped forward, his voice booming across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "we are here today to address the reckless actions of a man who has manipulated the stock market, misled investors, and caused massive harm to those who believed in his so-called vision. Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, has intentionally misled the public, and we are here to hold him accountable." The crowd shifted uncomfortably, eyes flicking from the lawyer to Musk. But Musk didn't flinch. He simply sat back, adjusting his suit jacket, a small, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. The judge, a seasoned and no-nonsense individual, turned to Musk with a raised eyebrow. "Mr. Musk," he began, "do you have any comment before we proceed?" There was a brief pause. Musk leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. "I'd like to address the court directly." A murmur rippled through the room. This was rare. Most defendants would sit quietly, letting their attorneys do the talking. But not Musk. He was a man who thrived in the spotlight, and he wasn't about to let this opportunity pass him by. The judge nodded, intrigued. "Proceed." Elon Musk stood up, adjusting his collar slightly. As he did, a few people in the room chuckled, perhaps at his casual demeanor, or maybe they were just struck by how little concern he seemed to have for the serious charges against him. But then, with a sudden and unexpected sharpness, Musk began to speak. "You want to know why I'm here today?" he asked, his voice steady but carrying an edge. "Well, let me tell you. I'm here because I've always tried to push boundaries. I've always believed that if you're not doing something that scares you, you're not doing anything worthwhile." There was a pause as the room absorbed his words. The smirk was gone, replaced with an almost eerie calmness. "I didn't create Tesla to sell cars. I didn't start SpaceX to fly people to space for the fun of it. I created these companies because I believed that we needed to change the world. We needed to take risks, real risks, to make a difference," Musk continued, pacing slightly as he spoke. "You may think I'm reckless. You may think that I've misled people. But what you don't understand is that the biggest mistake you can make in life is to never try. So, yes, I made decisions that some people didn't like. Yes, I said things that caused chaos. But I've never lied to anyone about what I'm trying to do." There was a sudden shift in the energy of the room. The judge, who had been leaning back in his chair, now sat forward, his expression unreadable. The prosecutor was momentarily silent, unsure of how to respond. "Mr. Musk," the judge said, his voice cold but thoughtful, "you are a very successful man, but that doesn't give you the right to break the law. You stand here today because of your actions, and we will determine whether or not those actions were in violation of the law. So, I would advise you to save your grand speeches for later." Musk's lips twitched into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Of course, Your Honor," he said, sitting back down. His eyes met the judge's for a split second, and the judge, despite himself, couldn't help but feel a twinge of respect. There was something about Musk's confidence that was hard to ignore. "Let's proceed," the judge said, his gavel coming down with a resounding thud. As the prosecutor began outlining the charges, Musk leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed, his gaze steady. There was no panic in his eyes, only the unmistakable look of a man who had faced greater challenges than this before. This was just another hurdle to overcome. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The prosecutor's words echoed in Musk's mind, a seemingly random phrase from the news coverage of his case. But in that moment, Musk didn't feel like just another headline. He felt like a man on a mission. His thoughts drifted briefly to the people who supported him, the employees at Tesla, the engineers at SpaceX, and the countless others who had believed in his vision. Musk took a deep breath, the quiet hum of the courtroom around him almost drowned out by his thoughts. This wasn't just about him anymore. He wasn't just defending his company or his reputation. He was defending the dream of a future where humanity could reach beyond Earth, where electric cars would be the norm, and where technology could solve some of the world's biggest problems. The charges against him were just the beginning, and he wasn't going to let them stop him now. He glanced up at the judge, meeting his eyes with a calmness that was almost unsettling. This story might just spark a new beginning, Musk thought. The whole world was watching, and he was ready to prove that no matter what they threw at him, he would stand tall. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Musk wondered silently. For him, it wasn't just the people who believed in him. It was the knowledge that the fight was always worth it. And so, as the courtroom proceedings continued, one thing became clear. Elon Musk wasn't just on trial. He was about to change the game, again. Elon Musk wasn't always the towering figure we know today. His journey began far from the world of electric cars and rockets, in a small, humble town in Pretoria, South Africa. He was the son of a Canadian model and an electromechanical engineer, a combination of creativity and logic that would come to define his character in the years ahead. But like many great figures, his story was not one of privilege or ease. It was filled with hardship, challenges, and moments of self-doubt. Growing up, Musk was often an outsider. He was bookish, introverted, and found it difficult to fit in with his peers. Bullied relentlessly during his childhood, he learned early on that the world could be a harsh place. It wasn't uncommon for him to come home from school with bruises or scars, both physical and emotional. Yet, this isolation fueled something in him, a desire to prove himself, not just to others, but to himself. The experiences of being an outsider were shaping him into someone who wouldn't just go along with the flow. Musk had a fire in him that would eventually drive him to reshape industries and take on the most formidable of challenges. His love for technology was apparent from an early age. At the age of 12, Musk taught himself computer programming, developing and selling a simple video game called Blaster for around $500. That early success gave him a glimpse of what the future could hold. But it wasn't enough. Musk didn't just want to build games. He wanted to change the world. He had a vision, a big one, that would lead him all the way to Silicon Valley. After moving to Canada at 17, Elon enrolled at Queen's University before transferring to the University of Pennsylvania. There, he earned degrees in both physics and economics, fields that would later play a crucial role in his ventures. But Musk was never one to stay idle for long. The call of the future, of something bigger, was always there. At the age of 24, Musk dropped out of a PhD program at Stanford University after just 2 days, choosing instead to pursue his entrepreneurial dreams. It was a risky decision, but it was also one of the defining moments of his life. He co-founded Zip2, a company that provided business directories and maps for newspapers. The company was sold to Compaq for nearly $300 million in 1999, and Musk's journey had officially begun. That was just the start. With the money from the Zip2 sale, Musk founded X.com, which would later become PayPal. He was known for his relentless drive, often working 100-hour weeks and rarely taking time off. While PayPal was taking off, Musk was already envisioning his next big project, knowing that this success would fund his true passion, space exploration. His ambition was boundless, and his ventures grew bolder. In 2002, after PayPal was acquired by eBay for $1.5 billion, Musk used his newfound wealth to create SpaceX with the goal of revolutionizing space travel. At the time, the idea of private companies sending rockets to space seemed like a fantasy. Yet, Musk's belief in the potential of space exploration was unwavering. He wanted to make life interplanetary, to make humanity a multiplanetary species. SpaceX was born from this dream. But even with all of Musk's achievements, it wasn't smooth sailing. He faced failure after failure, especially with SpaceX. The first 3 launches of SpaceX's Falcon 1 rocket failed, and the company was on the brink of collapse. There were times when Musk had to borrow money just to make payroll, but he never gave up. With a 4th launch, SpaceX succeeded, and everything changed. It was a turning point that would lead to groundbreaking contracts with NASA, successful missions to the International Space Station, and the development of the Falcon Heavy, the most powerful operational rocket in the world. Meanwhile, his other venture, Tesla, was taking on the auto industry. Musk had joined Tesla Motors in 2004, bringing his vision of sustainable energy to the company. Tesla was bleeding money, and there were plenty of doubters. People ridiculed him for trying to make electric cars cool. But Musk's vision didn't just stop at electric vehicles. He wanted to transform the entire transportation industry. Through years of struggle and innovation, Tesla began to make waves, leading the charge in electric cars with the Model S and later the Model 3. Tesla would go on to disrupt not only the auto industry, but also the energy sector with its solar solutions and battery storage systems. Musk's ventures were no longer just about making money. They were about making a lasting impact on humanity. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a man driven by a higher purpose. But the road to success was never a straight line. Behind the scenes, Musk faced numerous personal and professional challenges that many didn't see. His personal life, especially his relationships, became the subject of much public scrutiny. He had been married 3 times, to 2 different women, and was involved in highly publicized divorces. His relationships often took a back seat to his ambitions, and he had been known to sacrifice personal time in pursuit of his dreams. But through it all, Musk remained focused on his goals, often working around the clock to build the companies he believed in. His leadership style was often described as demanding and intense. Employees at Tesla and SpaceX would often recount long hours, high expectations, and a sense of urgency that permeated every project. Yet, Musk's relentless work ethic also inspired those around him. Those who stayed on with him through the hardest times shared his vision, believing that they were part of something far bigger than just building cars or launching rockets. And that was part of Musk's genius, his ability to inspire loyalty in the people who worked with him. Musk wasn't just a boss. He was a leader, a visionary, a man who saw the world not as it was, but as it could be. However, not everyone admired Musk's methods. There were critics who called him reckless, accusing him of overpromising and under-delivering. His social media presence, particularly his tweets, often led to controversy. The infamous funding-secured tweet in 2018, which claimed he had the funding to take Tesla private at $420 a share, resulted in a lawsuit and his eventual settlement with the SEC. Now, as Musk sat in that courtroom, facing charges that could bring his empire to its knees, the question on everyone's mind was, could this man, who had faced and overcome so many obstacles in his life, navigate the legal storm that was about to hit him? The room seemed to shrink around him, the weight of the lawsuit bearing down. But Musk's calm demeanor didn't change. He had been in the trenches before, and he wasn't about to let anything, no matter how severe, stand in his way. As the case began to unfold, everyone in the room, from the judge to the jury, was beginning to realize that this wasn't just a legal battle. It was the start of a new chapter in Musk's relentless pursuit of greatness. Elon Musk had always been the type of man who didn't just dream big. He acted on those dreams. And now, in the face of adversity, he was about to prove that even the most formidable challenges wouldn't stop him from pushing forward. And so, the next phase of his journey was about to begin. The courtroom was a battleground, and Elon Musk knew that every word, every move, every expression could either make or break his case. As the trial continued, the tension in the room was palpable. The media was all over the case, broadcasting every detail, and every day brought new twists and turns. The prosecutor, a sharp-witted attorney named Claire Roberts, was relentless. She was known for her ability to tear down even the most formidable of adversaries. Today, she stood before the jury, carefully outlining the charges against Musk. Her voice was steady, calculated, as she described how Musk had allegedly misled investors through his public statements. Each claim felt like a hammer strike, each accusation more severe than the last. The defendant, Mr. Musk, Claire Roberts began, turning to the jury with a piercing gaze, has repeatedly made statements that he knew were false, misleading, and intended to manipulate the market for his own benefit. And the consequences of his actions? Billions of dollars in damages. People lost their savings, their livelihoods, because of the reckless words of one man. Musk sat silently, his fingers tapping lightly on the armrest of his chair. His mind was racing, trying to anticipate Robert's next move, the next angle of attack. This was nothing new to him. He had faced criticism before, but this felt different. This was personal. As the prosecutor continued, Musk's thoughts drifted back to the events that had led to this moment. It all started with a tweet. A single tweet that would set off a chain reaction, changing the course of his life. The infamous funding-secured tweet, sent out in August 2018, had seemed innocent enough at the time. Musk had been frustrated with the constant pressure Tesla was under to meet production goals, and he had tweeted that he was considering taking Tesla private at $420 a share, with funding already secured. At first, it had seemed like a stroke of genius. Musk had always been known for his unconventional style and his tendency to challenge the status quo. But what followed was a whirlwind of chaos. The stock price surged, attracting the attention of regulators, investors, and the media. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, soon launched an investigation questioning Musk's ability to back up his claim. What followed were months of legal battles, settlements, and public scrutiny. Musk's credibility took a massive hit. While the SEC chose not to press criminal charges, the civil fines and consequences were severe. Tesla's stock price fluctuated wildly, and the company was forced to implement a series of governance changes. But for Musk, the worst part wasn't the legal consequences or the media frenzy. It was the realization that his intentions had been misunderstood. His tweet hadn't been about manipulating the market. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision born out of frustration with the system that constantly demanded Tesla meet unrealistic expectations. It had been an attempt to take control of Tesla's destiny, to free the company from the pressures of Wall Street. But in doing so, he had made an explosive mistake. As the prosecutor continued her case, Musk felt a growing unease. The trial wasn't just about the tweet anymore. It was about his entire career. The media had turned this into a spectacle, painting him as a reckless billionaire who cared more about his ego than the well-being of his employees or investors. But Musk knew better. He knew that everything he had built, Tesla, SpaceX, SolarCity, wasn't about making money or seeking fame. It was about creating a legacy, a future where technology could solve the world's biggest challenges. He had always pushed the envelope, always taken risks. That was who he was. But now, in the heat of this trial, his vision seemed clouded by the accusations swirling around him. The courtroom felt like a spotlight, casting harsh shadows on everything he had worked for. In that moment, Musk's thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice, the defense attorney, Adam Sinclair. A seasoned lawyer known for his sharp intellect and unwavering confidence, Sinclair had been with Musk through every major legal challenge. "Mr. Musk," Sinclair said, his voice calm but firm, "it's time to prepare your defense." Musk nodded, his eyes narrowing as he focused on his attorney. "I know. I'm ready." But Sinclair's next words gave him pause. "Elon, this is not going to be easy," Sinclair continued, his tone serious. "We've been over the facts, and there's no denying that the tweet was reckless. It triggered a lot of chaos. But what we need to show the jury is that your intent wasn't malicious. It wasn't about misleading people. It was about trying to push Tesla forward. You were frustrated, and yes, maybe you got carried away. But you didn't intend to harm anyone." Musk leaned back in his chair, processing the weight of those words. He had always known that this would be the challenge of his life. But now, sitting in that courtroom, he realized just how much was at stake. The world had always viewed him as a visionary, a genius. But in the eyes of some, he was also a reckless billionaire who could never be held accountable for his actions. It wasn't just his reputation on the line. It was the future of his companies, the future of Tesla, SpaceX, and the very technology that he believed could change the world. If he didn't win this case, everything he had built could come crashing down. The trial went on for days, each moment more intense than the last. Claire Roberts painted Musk as a man who was more interested in self-promotion than honesty, while Sinclair argued that Musk was a man driven by a vision. a vision that sometimes led him to make mistakes, but not out of malice. The tension continued to rise, and the courtroom became a microcosm of the broader battle Musk was fighting. It wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about defending the future he believed in, the future of clean energy, space exploration, and technological progress. But just as things seemed to reach a boiling point, something unexpected happened. The judge, Judge William Blackwell, a no-nonsense figure known for his fair but firm approach, paused the proceedings and turned to Musk. "Mr. Musk," Judge Blackwell said, his tone more contemplative than usual, "I've been watching you throughout this trial. You seem like a man who truly believes in what you're doing. But you also seem to be someone who tends to act impulsively. I'm curious, do you ever stop and think about the consequences before making these bold statements?" For the first time in the trial, Musk felt a flicker of vulnerability. It wasn't the question itself that struck him. It was the fact that Judge Blackwell saw through him. Musk had always acted on instinct, pushing forward without hesitation. But maybe, just maybe, the consequences of his actions were starting to catch up with him. Musk took a deep breath and looked the judge in the eye. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steady but with a hint of reflection, "I've always believed that the biggest risk in life is not taking risks. I know I've made mistakes, but my intent has always been to push humanity forward. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty." The room fell silent. Every eye in the courtroom focused on Musk. For the first time, he had shown a side of himself that few people ever saw, the vulnerability of a man who had risked everything for his dreams. And in that moment, the dynamics of the trial shifted. The jury, the judge, and even the prosecutor seemed to recognize that this wasn't just a legal case. It was the story of a man who had given everything for his vision of a better future. And so, the trial continued, but now, the outcome seemed less certain than ever before. The rising tension was about to give way to something much bigger, something that could change everything. The next few days of the trial were an emotional roller coaster. Elon Musk had, for the first time, shown a level of introspection and vulnerability that was rare for him. His words had hung in the air after his candid response to Judge Blackwell, and the courtroom seemed to shift. The tension that had once been palpable, almost suffocating, was now filled with something else: curiosity. Musk had always been a polarizing figure. His supporters saw him as a visionary, someone who was willing to risk it all to create a better world. But his critics saw him as reckless, someone who operated on impulse, often with little regard for the consequences. The trial was forcing people to confront both sides of Musk's persona. The courtroom had become a reflection of the duality of his character. A man capable of incredible genius, but also one who sometimes acted without fully considering the fallout. The prosecutor, Claire Roberts, had been relentless, and she was not about to ease up. She was determined to prove that Musk's actions had been calculated, not impulsive. As the trial dragged on, she brought in more witnesses, investors, former employees, financial analysts, each one testifying to the damage caused by Musk's erratic behavior. One witness in particular stood out: David Miller, a former Tesla investor who had sold his shares shortly after the funding secured tweet. Miller described the emotional toll the tweet had taken on him and his colleagues. "We were all shocked. It seemed too good to be true," Miller explained on the stand. "But as time went on, we realized that the entire situation was a mess. Musk's words, his tweets, created chaos. People lost money. I lost money. And no one seemed to take responsibility for it." Musk sat silently, his expression unreadable. He had heard these words before, but now they were being spoken directly to him. He knew that Miller wasn't wrong. The aftermath of the tweet had been devastating for many. Musk's own finances had been strained, and Tesla's stock had suffered. But was he really to blame for the fallout? The defense's strategy had been to show that Musk's intentions had always been in line with his long-term vision. His push to move Tesla forward, to take it private, to remove it from the pressures of Wall Street. But convincing the jury of that wasn't going to be easy. The damage had already been done, and Musk's public persona was no longer just that of a CEO. It had become the subject of national debate. On the fourth day of the trial, something unexpected happened that would shift the balance once again. Musk, who had been sitting quietly at the defense table throughout much of the proceedings, stood up suddenly. There was no dramatic gesture, no theatrical moment. It was just him, rising to his feet in the middle of Roberts' cross-examination. "Your Honor," Musk said, his voice firm but measured, "I would like to take the stand and explain my side of the story." The courtroom went silent. It wasn't typical for the defendant to take the stand in such a high-profile case, especially not when the prosecution had been so aggressive. But Musk's decision wasn't about following the conventional route. He wasn't going to sit back and let his fate be determined by lawyers and witnesses. He was going to tell his story, his truth. Judge Blackwell looked at Musk, considering the request. "Mr. Musk, are you sure about this? The prosecution will have the opportunity to cross-examine you, and I need you to understand that once you take the stand, there's no turning back." Musk nodded. "I'm sure, Your Honor." And so, for the first time in his life, Musk found himself in the spotlight in an entirely different way. It wasn't about a product launch or a groundbreaking innovation. It was about defending himself. He walked up to the witness stand, his posture straight, his face calm. The media was in a frenzy, cameras flashing, reporters scribbling frantically. Musk had always been comfortable in front of an audience, but today, it felt different. The weight of the courtroom pressed in on him. He looked out at the jury, then at the prosecutor, Claire Roberts. There was no anger in his gaze, just an almost quiet determination. "I've never been afraid of taking risks," Musk began, his voice steady, "and I've never been afraid of failing. In fact, I've always seen failure as part of the process. But what I can't stand is being misunderstood, especially when my intentions were never malicious." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "The tweet in question wasn't meant to mislead anyone," Musk continued. "It was a moment of frustration. Tesla was under immense pressure, and I thought that taking the company private would allow us to focus on long-term goals without the distractions of short-term market fluctuations. I had every intention of following through with it. I thought I had the financing lined up, but clearly I was wrong. I should have communicated better. I should have been more careful." Musk's voice was calm, almost detached, but there was an undeniable sincerity in his words. He wasn't making excuses. He was acknowledging his mistakes, something that had been rare in the months leading up to this trial. For the first time, he was giving the jury a glimpse into the man behind the headlines, the visionary who had put everything on the line to create something truly groundbreaking. "As a CEO, I'm supposed to make bold decisions, to take risks. But I understand that those decisions have consequences. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I wanted to help people, to push the world forward. That's what Tesla, SpaceX, and all my ventures have been about, changing the world for the better. And yes, I've made mistakes along the way, but I've learned from them." For a moment, there was silence in the courtroom. Even Claire Roberts, known for her unwavering confidence, seemed to pause and consider Musk's words. Judge Blackwell leaned forward, his hands clasped in front of him. "Mr. Musk," he said after a long pause, "you've made it clear that you were acting with the belief that you were doing what was best for Tesla. But it remains to be seen whether your actions were reasonable or if they were reckless." Musk nodded. "I understand, Your Honor." And just like that, the courtroom dynamic shifted. Musk's decision to take the stand had given him the opportunity to defend himself directly, to show the jury a side of him that had been overshadowed by the media's portrayal. For the first time, Musk felt like he was in control of his own narrative. As he returned to his seat, he glanced at his legal team. Adam Sinclair gave him a small nod of approval. Musk didn't expect the jury to instantly forgive him or for the case to turn in his favor immediately. But he had planted a seed of understanding. The trial wasn't over yet, but Musk knew that this moment, this turning point, could very well change everything. As the days wore on, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted. There was an air of anticipation, as if the whole city was holding its breath. The world was watching closely, and every word spoken in the courtroom had the potential to tilt the scales of justice one way or the other. Elon Musk had taken the stand, and in doing so, had shifted the trial into a new phase. His sincerity, his vulnerability, had shaken the courtroom. Even his staunchest critics in the media couldn't deny the weight of his words. They had expected him to be brash, defensive, to double down on his previous claims and downplay his mistakes. But what they had gotten was a man who admitted his flaws, who took responsibility for the consequences of his actions. That, in itself, had made the case more complicated. Yet the prosecution wasn't ready to relent. Claire Roberts had spent years honing her craft. She had an uncanny ability to break down her adversaries, to chip away at their defenses until nothing remained but raw truth. And that's exactly what she intended to do with Musk. She wasn't going to let a carefully crafted speech about good intentions sway her or the jury. The law, she believed, was clear. What Musk had done, whether it was out of frustration, ignorance, or negligence, had consequences. People had been harmed, and the system couldn't afford to let him get away with it. The prosecutor's cross-examination was like a surgeon's scalpel, sharp and deliberate. Every word, every question, was designed to peel back Musk's defense and reveal what she believed was the true picture of a man who had acted recklessly for the sake of his ego. "Mr. Musk," Claire began, as she stood up from her seat, her tone cool and calculated. "You've admitted that your tweet was careless, that it was impulsive, but let's get to the heart of the matter. Were you aware of the consequences of that tweet? Did you understand the impact it would have on your investors, your employees, and the stock market?" Musk, sitting at the witness stand, straightened his back. The calm, confident demeanor he had maintained throughout the trial was still intact. But now, as Roberts dug into him, a sense of uncertainty began to creep into his mind. He had hoped that his admission of guilt and his defense of his intentions would be enough, but Roberts was pressing him harder than ever. "I didn't anticipate all the chaos that would follow," Musk replied, his voice steady but tinged with the weight of truth. "I acted in frustration, yes, but I never intended to cause harm. I believe that taking Tesla private was the right move for the company's long-term success. I thought it would free us from the short-term pressures that Wall Street imposes on companies. But I failed to communicate that properly. I understand now that the tweet was a mistake." The room was silent for a moment as the jury absorbed Musk's response. Roberts took a step forward, leaning on the podium. "But you didn't just send a tweet," she pressed, her voice like a whip crack. "You made public statements. You publicly declared that you had secured funding. That is not the same as a casual tweet or an offhand remark. Those words had weight. You misled your investors. You misled the public." Musk opened his mouth to respond, but Roberts was relentless. "And when the SEC came knocking, when they questioned you about the tweet, did you ever consider the damage it could cause, not just to your reputation, but to the very company you claim to be saving? Tesla wasn't just some small startup. It was, and is, worth billions. You risked everything with a single tweet, Mr. Musk. A single reckless tweet." Musk shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had faced the SEC before. He had negotiated a settlement, paid fines, and agreed to steps that would ensure more oversight of his social media activity. But this was different. The stakes were higher now. It wasn't just a regulatory issue anymore. The public was watching, and in that moment, the weight of what he had done was clearer than ever. "Yes," Musk finally said, his voice low. "I understand that now. At the time, I thought I was doing what was best for Tesla, but I see now that I could have handled it differently. I should have communicated better. I should have been more cautious." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Musk had just admitted something that many had suspected all along, that his actions had been reckless, that he had failed to grasp the full impact of his decisions. Claire Roberts pressed on. "And when your stock price surged in the aftermath of that tweet, did you not realize that you were in the perfect position to profit? You were in a position of power, Mr. Musk. You had the world watching, and you did nothing to stop the madness. Your actions, your inaction, led to people losing money, people losing trust in you and your company." Musk's expression hardened. This was the point where his patience began to wear thin. He wasn't about to let Roberts twist his intentions any further. "I never wanted to profit from the tweet," Musk shot back, his voice firm. "If you look at the facts, I didn't sell any of my shares after that tweet. I wasn't trying to take advantage of the situation. I was trying to do something big, something that could have changed the direction of Tesla forever. Yes, it was a mistake, but it was a mistake made with the goal of doing something better for the company, for the people who believe in it." The prosecutor's face remained stone cold as she turned to the jury, her eyes scanning each one of them. She wasn't done yet. There was still one final strike she needed to make, one last angle of attack to cement her case. "But Mr. Musk," Roberts said slowly, almost casually, "when you made that tweet, you were already aware that the board of Tesla hadn't approved the move. You were aware that you were making a promise that you couldn't keep. And yet you proceeded. Why? Was this really about Tesla? Or was this just about your own image, your own ambitions?" The room seemed to hold its breath as the question landed. Musk's mind raced, but he knew there was no escaping this one. The truth, in this moment, was both a weapon and a burden. For a long moment, Musk didn't respond. The courtroom waited. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but resolute. "It was about Tesla," he said simply. "It was always about Tesla, but I admit I didn't think it through. I let my frustration with the system cloud my judgment. But my intentions were never about my image. It was always about getting Tesla to where it needed to go." Musk's words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity, but also with the understanding that he had just exposed himself in a way that could change everything. The jury was silent. Claire Roberts sat down, her expression unreadable. The defense had its work cut out for it. The trial had taken a turn, and where it would go next, no one could predict. Elon Musk, for all his brilliance, had just given the most honest answer he could, one that might very well haunt him in the coming days. But one thing was certain. The path ahead was more uncertain than ever. The following days were filled with increasing tension, both in the courtroom and for Elon Musk. After the intense back and forth between him and Claire Roberts, the prosecution had made its strongest case yet. The jury was clearly divided, their expressions ranging from skepticism to empathy as they absorbed Musk's words. The trial had reached a critical point, and the final decisions would hinge on how the defense responded. Musk's legal team, led by Adam Sinclair, had spent the night preparing their strategy for the cross-examination. They knew the risks. Claire Roberts had expertly picked apart Musk's defense, and now they had to find a way to turn the tide in their favor. The pressure on Musk was immense, but he understood the stakes. He had spent the last 2 decades building his empire, and now, with everything on the line, he had to trust his team and himself. As the morning of the next session arrived, there was an unusual sense of calm within the defense team. Sinclair had instructed Musk to remain composed, to focus on the facts, and to avoid getting drawn into a battle of egos. The defense needed to be strategic, not emotional. Musk couldn't afford to let his frustration show again, not after his vulnerable moments on the stand. The courtroom buzzed as the judge entered and the trial resumed. Claire Roberts stood confidently, preparing for her next move, but it was clear that something was different this time. The atmosphere in the room felt charged with an unseen current, like everyone could sense the pivotal moment approaching. As Roberts called her next witness, the defense team braced themselves for another round of aggressive questioning. But this time, it wasn't the prosecution that caught everyone off guard. It was Elon Musk himself. "Your Honor," Musk said, standing up without warning, "I'd like to address something directly, something I've been holding back." The room fell silent, every eye on Musk as he stepped forward, his posture straight and deliberate. This wasn't the prepared defense. This wasn't the scripted reply. This was something raw, something personal, something he hadn't planned to say. Judge Blackwell looked up, clearly surprised by Musk's sudden outburst. "Mr. Musk," the judge said, raising an eyebrow, "we are in the middle of cross-examination. What is it you wish to address?" Musk took a deep breath, his mind racing. He wasn't sure what he was about to say would work, but he felt the overwhelming need to speak the truth, to give the jury something real. "I've made a lot of mistakes," Musk began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Not just with this tweet, but in my life, in my businesses. I've failed, more times than I care to admit. But the one thing I've never done is act with malicious intent. I've always been driven by a desire to change the world, to do something better. Yes, I've been impulsive. Yes, I've taken risks that sometimes don't pay off. But I've always believed that if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough." The courtroom was still. It was a stark contrast to the earlier moments of intense cross-examination. Musk was speaking not as a CEO or a billionaire, but as a person a man who had built his entire life around the idea of pushing boundaries and challenging norms. For the first time in this trial, he wasn't just defending his actions. He was revealing his heart. I've been criticized for being too bold, for being too unconventional, for taking risks that others wouldn't dare to take, Musk continued. But the truth is, that's how change happens. You take risks, you make mistakes, and you learn from them. Tesla, SpaceX, all of it. These are the results of countless failures. But they are also the results of persistence. And no matter what happens in this courtroom, I'll keep pushing forward. I'll keep failing. Because that's how we move forward. That's how we make a difference. The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, even Claire Roberts seemed taken aback. There was no response, no snappy retort, no harsh question. It was as if the entire courtroom had paused to take in what Musk had just shared. Judge Blackwell cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Mr. Musk, while your statement is moving, it is not directly related to the matter at hand. Please remember that we are here to focus on the specifics of your actions regarding the tweet and its consequences. Musk nodded, his face a mixture of determination and weariness. Understood, Your Honor. But I needed to say it. Because no one is perfect. And no one in this room, including myself, is above making mistakes. I just want the jury to understand that my intentions were never to deceive or mislead anyone. He returned to his seat, his shoulders slightly slumped from the weight of what he had just laid bare. But in that moment, he felt a sense of release. For the first time in the trial, he had been completely open about who he was, the man behind the headlines, the controversies, the social media posts. It wasn't about the billion-dollar companies or the futuristic dreams of Mars. It was about a person grappling with the consequences of his own impulsiveness and ambition. The jury was silent, their faces unreadable. But Musk had done something he hadn't expected to do. He had connected with them on a human level. The rest of the day's proceedings were more subdued. The prosecution seemed slightly disoriented by Musk's unexpected emotional moment. Even Claire Roberts, usually so composed, appeared momentarily flustered. It was clear that Musk had thrown her off balance, and for the first time, she seemed unsure of how to proceed. In the days that followed, the trial continued, but the momentum had shifted. The defense team was more confident now, as if the courtroom itself had become a little less hostile. Musk, though still under intense scrutiny, seemed to carry himself with a quiet resolve. He had taken a significant risk by stepping forward and baring his soul, but it had paid off in ways that no one could have predicted. For the first time since the trial began, Musk was no longer just the defendant in a lawsuit. He had become something else entirely. A man on trial not only for his actions, but for his very character. And while the jury still had the final say, one thing was certain. They were no longer just evaluating the words of a CEO. They were evaluating the heart of a man who had lived through failure, perseverance, and the unyielding desire to change the world. The trial had reached a point where everything hung in the balance. Elon Musk had done what many would have deemed unthinkable. He opened his heart to the jury, admitting his flaws, and for the first time, he gave them a glimpse of the true Elon Musk, the man behind the genius, the risk-taker, the controversial billionaire. And while that moment had made an impact, the question remained. Would it be enough to change the course of the trial? After Musk's heartfelt speech, there was a palpable shift in the courtroom. Even the spectators who had filled the seats were quieter, more reflective. The media outlets, once relentless in their portrayal of Musk as a reckless businessman, now found themselves in a complex situation. They couldn't ignore the human side of the story that had emerged in the trial. But Claire Roberts, the prosecutor, was not one to be swayed by emotions. She had a job to do, and she was determined to stick to the facts. As the defense team rested, it was now her turn to put the finishing touches on her case. Her closing argument would be her chance to convince the jury that, despite Musk's emotional plea, the facts of the case could not be ignored. When the courtroom reconvened for the closing statements, the tension was thick, almost unbearable. Everyone knew that this was the final opportunity for both sides to make their mark. The jury was already beginning to form opinions, and now they would have to decide. Was Elon Musk guilty of misleading investors and committing securities fraud? Or had he merely been an ambitious visionary who had made a series of mistakes? Roberts stood up first, her expression as cold and calculating as ever. The courtroom fell silent as she approached the podium, and the weight of the moment settled over the room. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice firm and unyielding, "Elon Musk has had his moment. He's shown you his vulnerability, his humanity. But the law is not swayed by emotion. It is swayed by facts. And the facts of this case are simple. Elon Musk misled investors with his tweet. He acted recklessly, without regard for the consequences, and he put his company and its investors at risk." She paused for effect, her eyes scanning the room, making sure every juror was paying attention. "Mr. Musk may tell you that he was just trying to help Tesla, that he had the best interests of the company at heart, but that is not the issue here. The issue is whether his actions were legal. And the law is clear. You cannot make public statements that mislead investors. You cannot promise something that you cannot deliver. Mr. Musk did both of those things. He misled the public by claiming that he had secured funding when, in fact, he had not. He did not have the backing for his plan to take Tesla private. And that was not just a mistake. It was a violation of the law." Roberts' voice grew stronger as she went on. "Think about the impact of that tweet. The stock price surged. Investors scrambled to make decisions based on misinformation. And when the truth came out, when it became clear that the funding wasn't there, those investors lost money. The public lost faith. And Tesla, the very company that Mr. Musk claims to love, was left dealing with the fallout." She turned to face Musk, who sat stoically at the defense table, his eyes locked on hers. "You may feel sympathy for Mr. Musk, and you may admire his vision, but you cannot let that cloud your judgment. The law is the law, and Mr. Musk must be held accountable for the damage he caused." The prosecution's argument was hard-hitting, direct, and it painted Musk in the same light it had from the beginning of the trial. A reckless businessman who had acted without regard for the rules, thinking that his success could shield him from the consequences. But the truth was, the jury had heard Musk's side of the story, and the question now was whether they would accept his admission of guilt, his vulnerability, and his belief in the greater good of his actions, or whether they would stick with the facts and find him guilty of fraud. The defense was up next, and Adam Sinclair knew that he had a monumental task ahead of him. His job was to remind the jury of the human element, to draw them back to the idea that Musk wasn't some faceless CEO, but a man who had poured everything into making his company successful. But more than that, Sinclair needed to remind them that Musk had not acted with malicious intent. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Sinclair began, his tone measured but passionate. "What you've heard from the prosecution is a story of a man who made mistakes. But what you haven't been told is the truth behind those mistakes. Yes, Mr. Musk made a rash tweet. Yes, he did not have the funding secured at the time of that tweet. But to say that he acted in bad faith, to say that he intentionally misled anyone, that is not the truth." Sinclair paused and made eye contact with the jury, letting his words sink in. "Elon Musk is a visionary. He's a man who has dedicated his life to changing the world. He has revolutionized industries. He has created companies that have changed the very way we think about energy, transportation, and space travel. And yes, he's made mistakes along the way. But we cannot let those mistakes define him as a criminal." The defense attorney's voice softened as he moved closer to the jury box. "Mr. Musk didn't wake up one day and decide to deceive his investors. What he did was make an impulsive, ill-thought-out decision, one that he admits was a mistake. But let's not lose sight of the bigger picture. Elon Musk is a man who has done more for innovation, for the future of humanity, than most people could ever dream of. And yes, his tweet was poorly worded. Yes, it caused some chaos. But he never intended for it to harm anyone. He believed in his vision, and that belief led him to act." Sinclair's voice grew more impassioned as he neared the end of his statement. "We all make mistakes. We all say things in the heat of the moment that we regret. But that does not make us criminals. What Mr. Musk needs from you, as jurors, is the chance to move past his error and to continue his work toward building the future. Because that is what he has always been about. That is what Tesla, SpaceX, and all of his ventures have been about." The defense ended with one final plea, the words ringing out in the courtroom. We are here not to decide whether Mr. Musk is a perfect man, but to decide whether he is guilty of fraud. And I ask you, in all fairness, to consider this. Was this a crime, or was it simply the result of a man who believed in something greater than himself and made a mistake in the process? As Sinclair returned to his seat, the room was thick with tension. The jury exchanged glances, and the weight of the decision they were about to make was clear. For all the legal arguments, for all the evidence, this trial had come down to something far more intangible. The nature of Elon Musk himself. Was he a visionary who had stumbled, or a reckless man who had put others at risk? The jury would have to decide. But one thing was certain. This trial was far from over, and the outcome would have consequences far beyond the courtroom. The days following the closing arguments were tense, filled with an air of unease that hung over everyone involved in the trial. The jury had begun their deliberations, and no one knew how long it would take them to reach a verdict. The courtroom was quiet, almost too quiet, as both sides prepared for the inevitable moment when the decision would be handed down. Elon Musk spent the waiting days in a haze of uncertainty. He had faced many battles in his life, launching rockets into space, building electric cars that changed an entire industry, and battling countless critics. But this trial felt different. This wasn't just about his companies or his vision. This was about him as a person, his reputation, his future, the legacy he had spent his life building. The media had been relentless in their coverage. Headlines ranged from Elon Musk faces jail time over securities fraud to Musk's emotional defense could change the game. The public opinion was divided. Some believed Musk's emotional plea had shown vulnerability and sincerity, while others saw it as a calculated move to gain sympathy. The stock market, meanwhile, had been volatile, reacting to every twist and turn in the trial, adding another layer of pressure to the already high stakes. Musk had always been a man who thrived under pressure, but this was different. This was more personal than any of the challenges he had faced before. The looming possibility of a guilty verdict weighed heavily on him, despite his attempts to remain calm and collected. He was no stranger to scrutiny, but this felt more invasive, more real. This time, it was his integrity, his very character, that was on the line. The defense team gathered in their war room, reviewing the trial's progress. Adam Sinclair had been relatively quiet in the days since the closing arguments, letting his team work through the nuances of the case. But now, as the jury deliberated, he couldn't help but feel the weight of what was at stake. "We've done everything we could," Sinclair said, addressing his team. Musk was clear. He was genuine. "Now we wait." But waiting was never easy. The legal team wasn't the only ones on edge. Claire Roberts, the prosecutor, was equally consumed by the uncertainty of what would happen next. She had dedicated years of her career to building this case. She had methodically taken Musk apart, dissecting his every move and proving, in her mind, that he had misled investors for personal gain. But even she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Musk's emotional defense might have given the jury something to reconsider. At times, Roberts had felt her grip on the case slip. Musk's ability to connect with the jury, to show them his humanity, had thrown her off balance in a way she hadn't anticipated. The last thing she had expected was to face a man who didn't just defend himself with legal jargon, but with raw emotion. Still, Roberts was a seasoned professional. She had seen enough to know that no matter how compelling Musk's testimony had been, the law was still the law. Back in the courtroom, the clock ticked slowly toward the moment everyone had been waiting for. The judge had instructed the jury to deliberate until they reached a consensus, and the courtroom was filled with a quiet tension. Attorneys on both sides sat in their seats, occasionally whispering among themselves but mostly lost in their own thoughts. The gallery was sparsely populated, as the families and friends of both parties had already begun to leave for the day. Elon Musk sat in the defense table, staring at the empty seat where the jury would soon return with their decision. His fingers tapped absent-mindedly on the table, but his mind was elsewhere. He had tried to prepare for this moment. He had tried to remind himself that, in the end, the verdict was out of his hands. But the truth was, he didn't know what to expect. The future of his companies, his reputation, everything he had worked for, hung in the balance, and no amount of preparation could take away the dread that gnawed at him. Finally, After what seemed like an eternity, the doors to the jury room opened, and the 12 jurors filed back into the courtroom. The room went silent. Everyone held their breath. The judge nodded for them to take their seats. As the foreperson of the jury stood up, Elon felt his pulse quicken. He had been here before, in situations where everything rested on a single moment, but this was different. This wasn't just about a business decision, a failed product launch, or a missed deadline. This was about his life, his legacy, and the man he had strived to be. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Blackwell asked, his voice cutting through the stillness. The foreperson nodded, a solemn expression on her face. We have, Your Honor. The foreperson handed the verdict slip to the court clerk, who stood up and slowly made his way to the judge. As the paper was read aloud, the world seemed to hold its breath. We, the jury, find the defendant, Elon Musk, not guilty of securities fraud. The words hung in the air, echoing through the courtroom. For a moment, there was no sound, no movement. The weight of the decision settled over everyone present. Elon Musk sat frozen, his mind racing. Not guilty. The words were almost surreal. He had expected anything, guilty, a hung jury, but not this. Not this clean verdict. The gallery erupted into whispers, some in disbelief, some in relief. Musk's legal team stood up, their faces a mix of disbelief and joy, while Claire Roberts, though composed, seemed to take a deep breath, her shoulders slumping slightly in the wake of the verdict. Musk's defense attorney, Adam Sinclair, exchanged a quick glance with his client. There was no celebration, no cheering. This moment, however triumphant, felt more like a release than a victory. The pressure that had been building for months had finally been lifted, but the toll of the trial, on Musk, on his team, on everyone, was undeniable. Elon stood up slowly, his legs unsteady as though the gravity of the moment had caught up with him. He turned toward the jury, and for the first time in weeks, his expression softened. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice full of emotion. "Thank you for your careful consideration." The jury members nodded, some with solemn expressions, others offering small, sympathetic smiles. Elon Musk had been found not guilty, but there was a sense that, for all the legal victory, something else had been lost in the process. Trust, perhaps, or the perception of a man who had once been seen as an almost invincible figure in the world of technology and business. As Musk made his way out of the courtroom, the crowd outside had already begun to gather, eager to hear his side of the story. But Musk didn't speak to the press. Instead, he simply walked away, his thoughts still swirling. He had won, but the road ahead was uncertain. There was much to rebuild, not just in the eyes of the world, but within himself. The verdict had been a victory in the legal sense. But Musk knew that the journey toward redemption was far from over. Elon Musk walked out of the courthouse, his legal team behind him. The streets were crowded with reporters, photographers, and spectators, eager to catch a glimpse of the man who had just been acquitted of securities fraud. The flashing cameras seemed like a blur to Musk, who was still processing the weight of the verdict. The cheers and questions from the media barely reached him as he moved forward, his steps slow but deliberate. The feeling of relief was unmistakable, but there was no joy, no celebration, just a quiet understanding that his life had just taken another unexpected turn. He had been through countless battles, some of them physical, some intellectual, and now, this one had been a legal one. And while the outcome was in his favor, he couldn't help but feel the emotional toll of everything that had transpired. The last few weeks had been an intense roller coaster, and the crash of the final verdict felt almost surreal. Musk had always been the type to embrace challenges, to look forward and push the boundaries of possibility. But this trial had been different. It had forced him to confront not just the public's perception of him, but his own. The man who stood before the cameras now was different than the one who had walked into that courtroom weeks ago. His vulnerabilities had been laid bare, and no matter the verdict, they would never be fully erased. As Musk made his way toward his waiting car, his legal team surrounded him, ensuring that he didn't get overwhelmed by the media frenzy. Adam Sinclair, who had worked tirelessly on the case, stepped beside him, offering a brief but genuine smile. "You did well," Sinclair said, his voice low, trying to maintain a sense of professionalism despite the emotions of the moment. Musk nodded but didn't speak. He was lost in thought, his mind circling back to the trial, to the moments when he had felt the heat of the prosecution's questions, when he had let his guard down and shared pieces of his soul with the jury. He knew that he had made the right choice in being honest, in showing the world the man behind the headlines. But he couldn't help but wonder, was it enough? Would this victory be enough to rebuild the trust he had lost over the years? Once in the car, Musk settled into the seat, staring out the window as the city passed by in a blur. The weight of the verdict was still there, pressing down on him. But it was also the weight of the future, the unknowns that awaited him now that the legal battle had ended. He had always prided himself on his resilience, his ability to move forward even when things seemed impossible. But this time, he wasn't sure where to go next. The trial had exposed the cracks in his public image, and while the jury had sided with him legally, the broader public was still divided. Some believed in him, but many others saw him as a reckless, impulsive figure, someone whose ambition outweighed his responsibility. Where to now? Musk asked, breaking the silence as he turned to his driver. Back to the office, sir? The driver asked, his eyes focused on the road. Musk thought for a moment. No, take me to the SpaceX facility. I need to think. The driver nodded, and the car made a sharp turn toward the outskirts of the city. Musk's thoughts continued to swirl. The verdict had given him his freedom, but it hadn't solved the deeper issues that lay ahead. His companies were still facing challenges, from the production issues at Tesla to the ambitious but costly missions at SpaceX. The legal battle had taken its toll, but now he needed to refocus. He needed to reconnect with the mission that had driven him from the very beginning. As the car pulled up to the SpaceX headquarters, Musk stepped out and walked toward the launch pad. The facility was quiet in the early evening hours, with only a few workers still on site. The towering rockets loomed in the distance, a reminder of the incredible dreams Musk had worked so hard to turn into reality. Standing there, staring up at the rockets, Musk felt something stir within him, a renewed sense of purpose. This was what had always mattered to him: space exploration, sustainable energy, a future beyond Earth. The public trials, the media frenzy, the legal battles, they all seemed so distant now, as if they belonged to another world entirely. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill his lungs. The pressure, the scrutiny, the courtroom, all of it was fading away. Here, in the quiet hum of the SpaceX facility, he felt like he could breathe again. Musk knew that he had work to do. There was so much more to accomplish. The trial had been a roadblock, but it was a temporary one. The world outside the courtroom would always be full of doubters, critics, and challenges, but he was no stranger to adversity. He had faced it head-on before. And now, with the legal battle behind him, it was time to push forward. As he stood there, looking out at the rockets, the weight of the past few weeks began to lift. He had made mistakes, yes, but he had learned from them. He had shown vulnerability when it mattered most. And now, with the world watching, it was time to show them what he could do next. Let's get to work, he muttered to himself, his resolve hardening. There was no time to waste. The future was waiting, and Elon Musk was ready to face it, head-on, with all the ambition, determination, and vision that had gotten him this far. Elon Musk stood at the launch pad, the soft hum of machinery in the distance reminding him that the work never stopped. SpaceX was in full swing, with rockets ready for their next mission. But today, there was something different in the air. It wasn't just the usual energy of a busy day at the SpaceX facility. It was a kind of tension, an undercurrent that, for the first time in years, Musk couldn't shake off. His legal battle was over, but the road to redemption was far from smooth. In fact, the real work had only just begun. As he walked along the tarmac, he saw the familiar faces of his team, each one immersed in their tasks, yet there was a subtle change in their demeanor. They weren't as eager to approach him with their usual enthusiasm. They were cautious, almost guarded, and Musk couldn't blame them. The trial had cast a long shadow, one that extended far beyond the courtroom. He had been acquitted, but the scars left by the media circus, the public scrutiny, and the internal battles were still fresh. The world may have been satisfied with the verdict, but those who had stood by him through the storm now had their own questions. They had seen the cracks in the Musk persona, the side of him that wasn't invincible. But Elon Musk was not a man who could be deterred for long. He had spent years building companies that defied the odds, that challenged the status quo, and revolutionized entire industries. And now, he was determined to rebuild his image, not because of the trial, but because he had more work to do. The future of humanity, the future of technology, was too important to be sidelined by a momentary lapse in judgment. He approached the group of engineers who were gathered around a prototype for a new rocket design. Their faces brightened when they saw him, but there was still a hesitation in the way they looked at him. They weren't sure what to expect from him anymore, and that uncertainty hung between them like a cloud. "How's it going?" Musk asked, trying to sound casual, as he peered over the shoulder of one of the engineers at the plans for the rocket. One of the engineers, a woman in her early 30s named Carla, glanced at him before responding. "It's going well, but we've encountered a few design issues with the thrusters. We're looking into ways to optimize the fuel usage." Musk nodded, his mind already shifting into problem-solving mode. "Make sure to prioritize fuel efficiency. We're not just building rockets to go to space anymore. We're building them for the future of humanity. This has to be the most sustainable design we've ever made. And I want to make sure the thrusters are able to handle the payload for Mars missions. Think long-term." Carla nodded, her confidence slowly returning as she sensed Musk's usual fire reigniting. It wasn't just about the rockets or the technology. It was about vision, passion, and the relentless pursuit of something greater than oneself. As the conversation shifted into technical jargon, Musk found himself more engaged than he had been in a while. The intricacies of engineering, the potential for space exploration, and the new challenges to solve. This was where he truly thrived. This was where he felt like himself again. The courtroom drama, the media circus, the whispers about his motives, all of it faded into the background when he was surrounded by the people who shared his vision. But even as he worked, Musk couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something was missing. He could feel the pressure to prove himself again, not just to the world, but to the very people who had been in the trenches with him all along. A few days later, Musk was sitting in his office, the weight of the trial still on his mind. He had spent hours reviewing data, making phone calls to his executives, and brainstorming new ideas for Tesla and SpaceX, but nothing seemed to have the same urgency it once did. The fire that had once driven him so fiercely felt a little dimmer now, as if something had shifted within him. He thought about the moments during the trial when he had allowed his guard to fall, when he had shared his vulnerabilities with the jury, admitting that he wasn't perfect, that he had made mistakes, that he was human. It had been a rare moment of honesty in a world that often demanded perfection, and in that honesty, he had seen a glimpse of something new. Not just the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, but a man who had the capacity to grow, to evolve. The question was, could he keep moving forward? Could he rebuild what had been shaken during the trial, not just in the eyes of the public, but in the hearts of those who had once believed in him without question? He sat back in his chair, staring at the window, as the sun dipped below the horizon. The future was still uncertain, and there was no guarantee that he would ever regain the trust of everyone who had turned their backs on him. But the journey wasn't over. He had seen what could be accomplished with vision, determination, and a relentless pursuit of the impossible. Musk had built his empire on the foundation of innovation. Now, he had to rebuild it on something deeper: trust. Trust in himself, trust in his team, and ultimately, trust in the future he was trying to create. The next morning, Musk called a company-wide meeting. This wasn't something he did often. He was known for his hands-on leadership, for the late-night emails and spontaneous problem-solving sessions, but he rarely addressed the entire company at once. It was time to change that. As the employees of SpaceX filled the massive conference room, there was an air of anticipation. Everyone knew the importance of this meeting, and there was an underlying sense of curiosity. What did Elon Musk have to say after everything that had happened? When the room settled, Musk stood at the front, his hands clasped behind his back, looking every bit the visionary entrepreneur he had always been. But today, there was something different in his expression, a sense of humility, of awareness. "I know the past few months have been difficult," Musk began, his voice steady but tinged with sincerity. "The trial, the media frenzy, the uncertainty, we've all felt it. I felt it, but I want to make something clear. I'm not giving up on what we're building here. Not for 1 second. And I'm not asking you to either. He paused, letting his words sink in. The room was completely still. We've been through a lot, and it's time to refocus. We're not just here to build rockets or cars. We're here to change the world. And the world needs us more than ever. Musk's gaze swept across the room, locking eyes with some of the key engineers and executives. We've all made mistakes, myself included. But that's not what defines us. What defines us is how we move forward. And we're going to move forward together. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. I need you all. And I need you to know that I'm in this with you. We have a job to do. The future is out there. Let's go get it. The room erupted into applause, and for the first time in a while, Musk felt a spark of something familiar. Hope. Determination. The fire that had gotten him this far. The journey was far from over. But Elon Musk knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning of his next chapter. The days following the all-hands meeting were a turning point for SpaceX, but more importantly, for Elon Musk himself. The words he had spoken that day were more than just a rallying cry for his employees. They were a promise. A promise to himself, to his team, and to the world that he wasn't just going to return to business as usual. He was going to rebuild something deeper, something more lasting. He was going to rebuild trust. Musk had always been the kind of person who believed that his work spoke louder than words. He had built his companies from the ground up by focusing on the bigger picture, pushing boundaries, and creating groundbreaking technologies. But he now understood that there was something just as important as innovation. The relationships he had with the people who made it all possible. And those relationships needed attention. Walking through the hallways of SpaceX's headquarters, Musk could feel the shift. There was a renewed energy in the air. Employees were moving faster, talking more passionately, and smiling more. It wasn't just the rush of working on the latest rocket launch. It was the sense of purpose that had returned. Musk had always been able to ignite that fire in his team, but now there was a sense that they were igniting it in themselves. But even as the energy in the company began to change, Musk knew that winning back trust was not something that could happen overnight. It would take more than a meeting or a speech. It would take time, and it would require real, tangible change. Over the next few weeks, Musk made a concerted effort to be more present with his team. He spent more time on the factory floor, engaging with engineers and technicians in ways that he hadn't done in years. He asked questions, listened more than he spoke, and showed a level of vulnerability that was rare for someone in his position. His behavior was met with cautious optimism at first. People weren't sure what to make of the change. But slowly, as Musk's actions began to align with his words, the skepticism began to fade. They saw that he was truly committed to not just pushing forward with ambitious projects, but with understanding and caring for the people who made those projects possible. At Tesla, the focus shifted as well. Musk knew that Tesla's success depended not only on the quality of its cars, but also on the trust and loyalty of its customers and investors. The company had been rocked by the scandal during the trial, and while the legal outcome had been in his favor, the public image of Tesla was still in flux. To address this, Musk announced a new initiative, a transparent quarterly report that not only included updates on Tesla's financials, but also on the company's ethical practices, sustainability efforts, and commitments to innovation. This wasn't just about selling cars anymore. This was about creating a legacy built on integrity, responsibility, and a deep commitment to making the world a better place. Musk also took a more active role in speaking to the public. His social media accounts, which had previously been a platform for bold statements and unfiltered thoughts, were now used more strategically. He used Twitter and other channels to share behind-the-scenes glimpses of Tesla's sustainability projects, updates on the Mars mission, and his thoughts on the future of artificial intelligence. His goal was no longer to stir the pot or generate controversy for the sake of headlines. It was to show people who he really was, not just the CEO of a billion-dollar company, but a person with a vision who was willing to work hard to earn back trust. Despite his best efforts, however, there were still critics. The media had been quick to turn Musk's personal life into a spectacle, and the scars of the trial were still fresh. But Musk had learned to navigate these challenges in a way he hadn't before. He didn't shy away from the tough questions, But he also didn't get distracted by the noise. He kept his focus on what mattered most, the future. One evening, as Musk sat in his office at Tesla, reviewing the latest design prototypes for the new electric vehicle line, he received an unexpected message from an old friend, Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. The message was simple, but it carried a weight that Musk couldn't ignore. "Hey, Elon, let's talk. Been a while." Musk smiled at the message. It had been years since he and Tim had spoken face-to-face, although they'd occasionally exchanged a few words through text. The two of them had always had a somewhat strained relationship. Their companies had often been seen as rivals, and there had been plenty of public tension over the years. But Musk respected Tim Cook. Apple's success was undeniable, and Cook's leadership was something that Musk admired, even if they didn't always see eye to eye on business strategy. Musk responded quickly, setting up a time for them to meet in person. It was time to step outside of his own bubble, time to hear from someone who had navigated the storm of public opinion with a much quieter and more measured approach than Musk ever had. When the day of the meeting arrived, Musk found himself sitting across from Tim Cook at a quiet cafe in Palo Alto, far from the hectic pace of their respective headquarters. The two men were worlds apart in many ways, but they had one thing in common: a relentless drive to change the world. "Good to see you," Musk said, shaking Cook's hand as he sat down. "You too," Cook replied, his tone calm and composed as always. "I've been following what's been going on with you lately." "A lot to unpack, huh?" Musk let out a small laugh. "You could say that. I've had my fair share of curveballs, that's for sure." Cook nodded, looking thoughtful. "I know a thing or two about facing public scrutiny. It's not easy. But you know, Elon, the biggest challenge isn't the media or the critics. It's about finding a way to stay true to yourself, even when the world seems to be pulling you in 100 different directions." Musk leaned forward, intrigued. "And how do you do that? Stay true to yourself, I mean?" Cook smiled slightly, a rare moment of openness. "You keep your focus on the long-term vision. The noise will always be there, whether it's people doubting your decisions or trying to tear you down. But you've got to remember why you started in the first place. And you've got to surround yourself with people who believe in that vision, even when things get tough." Musk nodded, taking in Cook's words. He had always relied on his instincts, but there was something about hearing it from someone with Cook's level of experience that struck a chord. The idea of finding his center, of focusing on the long-term mission, felt more resonant than ever. "Thanks, Tim. I appreciate that," Musk said. "I've got a lot of work ahead of me, but I think I'm starting to figure things out." Cook smiled, a quiet approval in his eyes. "You always were a visionary. Just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons." As the meeting came to a close, Musk felt a renewed sense of clarity. The challenges he faced were far from over, but he was beginning to understand that the path forward wasn't just about fighting battles. It was about staying grounded in his purpose. And now, with the weight of the trial behind him, it was time to let that purpose guide him once more. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk woke early the next day, his mind racing with ideas. The conversations he'd had with his team, the discussions with Tim Cook, and his growing commitment to rebuild his reputation had all fused into something new, a sense of clarity. It was time for the next chapter, not just for SpaceX or Tesla, but for himself. He had learned many things during his legal battle, but one lesson had stood out above all. True innovation could not just be about breaking the rules and defying expectations. It also had to be about responsibility, personal responsibility, corporate responsibility, and the responsibility to his mission. As the sun streamed through his office windows, Musk made a decision. He wasn't going to let the mistakes of the past cloud his future. He would use them as fuel for the next big leap. He wasn't just going to make cars or rockets. He was going to build something that could change the world. Something that wasn't just a reflection of his genius, but also of his growth as a leader. That day, he called a private meeting with his executive team at Tesla. The new product line was coming together, but Musk knew that it needed something more. A bold new direction, a leap forward in the electric vehicle, EV, market that would once again set Tesla apart from its competitors. They had done electric better than anyone else, but now, he was thinking beyond that. What if Tesla's next move wasn't just about electric cars? When the team gathered around the conference table, Musk wasted no time. He didn't want to drag things out, to engage in endless brainstorming sessions. He was ready to push boundaries once again. "I've been thinking," he began, leaning forward, his elbows resting on the table. "What if Tesla became the leader not just in electric vehicles, but in sustainable, integrated transportation?" The team looked at him, some with curiosity, others with caution. They had seen Musk's vision unfold time and time again. But this was different. There were already electric trucks, autonomous vehicles, and the promise of smart cities on the horizon. How would this new vision stand out? Musk continued, his voice picking up steam. "Imagine an entire ecosystem, not just a car. Something that connects to our solar products, our energy storage solutions, and even extends to things like sustainable public transportation. We're thinking bigger than just cars. We're talking about a complete reimagining of the transportation system, a system where every product works together seamlessly to reduce the environmental impact, to push the limits of what's possible." The room was silent for a moment. The idea was bold, even by Musk's standards. But as the implications of what he was saying began to sink in, the excitement in the room grew. This wasn't just a new vehicle design. It was the foundation of a new transportation ecosystem, one that could reshape how people traveled, powered by renewable energy and self-sustaining technologies. "We have the infrastructure," Musk continued, his energy growing. "We have the technology to integrate autonomous driving, electric vehicles, and renewable energy solutions. It's all about how we connect the dots. I want to lead the way in a transportation revolution, one that goes beyond the car itself." His team exchanged glances, the excitement palpable now. The possibility of connecting Tesla's electric vehicles with solar roofs and energy storage solutions seemed like a logical next step. But Musk wasn't stopping there. He wanted to make sure that everything, every component, every product, worked together as part of an integrated, sustainable whole. Whether it was an electric truck for hauling, a self-driving taxi service, or an EV that charged itself with solar energy, the goal was simple: to create a cohesive, zero-emission system that could reshape how society moved, lived, and powered itself. "Think about it," Musk said, as he leaned back in his chair. "We're not just making electric cars anymore. We're making an entire ecosystem for sustainable living. Tesla is going to lead the charge in this new world. And we're going to make it happen, sooner than anyone thinks." The room was alive with ideas now, each executive pitching in with their thoughts. They discussed everything from expanding battery technology to revolutionizing the way autonomous vehicles could be integrated into cities. The potential was limitless. The more they spoke, the clearer it became. This was the next big leap for Tesla. This wasn't just about building better cars. It was about building a future that had never been imagined before. As the meeting wound down, Musk felt the energy of the room resonate with him. This was the spark he had been searching for. His vision had always been about reaching beyond what was possible, but now, it wasn't just about the technology. It was about creating something greater than himself, something that would outlast his mistakes and solidify his place in history as a true innovator. He could feel the weight of his past decisions, mistakes, setbacks, and failures. But in that room, surrounded by people who believed in him, he felt lighter. He was no longer the man struggling to prove himself. He was the leader of a movement, one that would change the world in ways people could only begin to imagine. As the team disbanded and Musk walked back to his office, his thoughts raced ahead to the next steps. The real work was just beginning. He had learned the importance of trust, but he now understood that trust had to be earned, not just from the world, but from his team, his customers, and ultimately, from himself. This wasn't just about rebuilding. It was about creating something entirely new. And Musk was determined to lead the charge into this new world. The days that followed were filled with action. Musk threw himself into the work with even more intensity than before. He spent long hours with engineers, refining the vision of an interconnected transportation ecosystem. He met with energy experts to discuss the future of solar power and how Tesla could make renewable energy as accessible and reliable as traditional energy sources. And he personally oversaw the development of the autonomous driving software that would power Tesla's self-driving vehicles. But even as the excitement of the new initiative consumed him, Musk knew that this wasn't just about the technology, it was about the people behind it. He made it a point to sit down with key team members, asking for their input, listening to their concerns, and making sure that they felt like active contributors to the mission. He wasn't the same leader he had been before the trial. He was different now, more open, more patient, more aware of the importance of the human element in his work. Months passed, and the concept of Tesla's new integrated transportation ecosystem began to take shape. The first prototypes of self-driving vehicles, powered by Tesla's advanced energy solutions, were in the testing phase. Plans for a new sustainable city, designed around Tesla's technologies, began to take form. The future Musk had envisioned was becoming a reality. It was exhilarating, but it was also humbling. Musk understood that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be setbacks, criticism, and obstacles at every turn. But for the first time in a long while, he felt ready. This was the beginning of something that would not just restore his reputation, but redefine it. And as he looked ahead, Musk knew one thing for sure. The future had never looked brighter. As Tesla's new initiatives took shape and Musk's bold vision began to materialize, the public was watching. The world had been captivated by his previous achievements, from the success of SpaceX to the mass adoption of Tesla's electric vehicles. Now, the narrative surrounding Musk had shifted dramatically. No longer was he just a tech visionary. He was a man under the microscope, constantly under scrutiny for his actions, his words, and his decisions. But this time, Musk was determined to control the narrative. He knew that no matter how revolutionary his ideas were, they would be met with criticism, especially from those who had once doubted him. The media, which had often sensationalized his every move, would not back down easily. But now, Musk was ready for the battle. He had learned, through the trial and the pressure it placed on him, that he couldn't avoid the public eye. Instead, he had to own it. His approach began with a renewed commitment to transparency. While Tesla and SpaceX were often seen as secretive and elusive, Musk now understood the value of letting the public in, showing them not just the end results but the process, the struggles, and the people behind the technology. He had nothing to hide. And with that mindset, he made an unprecedented move. He invited a team of independent journalists to visit the Tesla factory and document the development of the new, integrated transportation ecosystem. It wasn't just about showing the world the latest innovations. It was about showing them the heart of the company, the passion and dedication that fueled everything they did. Musk knew that if people could see the level of commitment that Tesla's engineers and designers had, they would understand why he was so relentless in his pursuit of progress. The day of the visit, Musk stood at the entrance of the factory, greeting the journalists as they arrived. The media presence was intense, cameras flashing as they entered the building. There was a mix of curiosity and skepticism in the air. Musk had always been a polarizing figure, but today he was determined to change the narrative. He knew that actions would speak louder than words. As they walked through the factory floor, Musk led the group personally, showing off the cutting-edge technology that was being developed. The self-driving prototypes, still in their early stages, were surrounded by engineers who eagerly explained the innovations behind them. There were also new battery designs, developed to provide more energy storage and efficiency than ever before, and solar panels that were being adapted to work in tandem with the electric vehicles. Throughout the tour, Musk made it a point to let the team hear directly from his employees. It wasn't just about him. It was about the people who were working tirelessly to bring his vision to life. Musk had learned the hard way that building a company wasn't just about innovation. It was about building relationships, trust, and an environment where everyone felt valued. By the end of the tour, it was clear that something had shifted. The journalists, who had initially been skeptical, were now visibly impressed. They saw the passion in the engineers' eyes, the precision with which the work was being done, and the commitment to creating a better, more sustainable world. The article that followed was one of the most positive pieces that Musk had received in years. Still, Musk knew that this was just the beginning. The media had a tendency to latch onto news stories, and he was far from finished with his work. But this step had been crucial in shaping the public's perception of him and his companies. He wasn't just the tech mogul who made headlines for controversial tweets or bold statements. He was someone who was working to make a lasting impact, someone who was committed to doing the hard work of not only building new technologies, but earning the trust of the people who would use them. And yet, as Musk watched the media reports roll in and saw the positive coverage flood in, there was something in his gut that told him the battle wasn't over. The criticism, while muted for now, could return at any moment. The public's perception of him and his companies would never be completely stable. He had learned that the hard way during his trial. That night, as he sat in his office at Tesla, Musk reflected on the long road ahead. He had come a long way from the chaotic days of the trial, but the challenges were far from over. His companies were still growing, and with that growth came new challenges. He couldn't afford to rest on his laurels. His thoughts were interrupted by a message that flashed across his screen. It was from one of his most trusted advisors, Linda. She had been by his side through thick and thin, and her advice had always been valuable. "Elon, I just spoke to the board," the message began. "They're excited about the direction things are going, but we need to address the next big issue. There's growing concern about how the government is going to respond to our new initiatives. The regulatory landscape is shifting rapidly, and we need to be prepared." Musk sighed as he read the message. He had known this day was coming. The success of Tesla and SpaceX had always been tempered by the scrutiny of regulators. It was part of the price of innovation. He immediately called Linda to discuss the situation. "Do we have a strategy in place?" he asked, running his hand through his hair. "We're working on it," Linda responded. "But there are a lot of moving parts. The government has always been slow to react to new technologies, and the shifts we're seeing in the transportation and energy sectors are no exception. We need to be proactive, take the lead on these issues before we're forced to react." Musk leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The regulatory landscape had always been a thorn in his side. Whether it was environmental concerns, labor laws, or safety regulations, it felt like there was always someone trying to hold back progress. But this time, Musk wasn't going to wait for the regulations to catch up. He would lead the charge to shape the future of sustainable transportation, not just as a business but as a voice for the industry. "We're going to stay ahead of them," Musk said, his voice filled with resolve. "Let's start organizing meetings with key government officials. We need to make sure they understand the importance of what we're doing, not just for Tesla, but for the future of the planet." Linda paused for a moment. "I'll get the ball rolling, Elon. But just remember, the government isn't always quick to embrace change." Musk smiled, a fire rekindled in his chest. "I know, but change is coming whether they're ready or not." The weeks that followed Musk's media tour and his conversations with Linda were full of activity. Despite the positive press surrounding Tesla's new direction and the transparency initiative, Musk knew that the real work was just beginning. His next challenge would be convincing the public and the regulatory authorities that his ambitious plans weren't just visionary, they were feasible, practical, and necessary for the future of the planet. As he prepared to meet with government officials, Musk realized that the public's perception of his companies had only shifted so far. People loved the idea of clean energy, sustainable transportation, and self-driving cars, but there was still a great deal of skepticism when it came to the logistics of these projects. The big question was whether governments would support such large-scale changes and, more importantly, whether they would remove the regulatory obstacles that had traditionally impeded innovation. Elon had always prided himself on the ability to move fast and break things, whether in the realm of space exploration or electric vehicles. But this was different. The stakes were higher now, and the terrain was more complex. He needed to ensure that his companies wouldn't just be part of the technological revolution. They needed to be seen as leaders in shaping policy, environmental standards, and public infrastructure. As he walked into his office one morning, he was greeted by his executive team, who had spent the last few days researching the political and regulatory landscape. Linda was standing by the conference table, looking more serious than usual. "Elon," she began, "I've set up meetings with the Department of Transportation and the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, for next week. But there's something you should know. We're going to face resistance. There are key stakeholders who won't easily embrace this vision, especially when it comes to altering existing infrastructure. The oil and gas industry, for example, has a lot of sway with certain lawmakers, and self-driving technology still has a long way to go before it's widely accepted." Musk didn't flinch. He had anticipated some resistance. The transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy was always going to be met with pushback. But he also knew that resistance was inevitable when you were trying to change the world. He had seen it firsthand with SpaceX and Tesla, and he had faced the naysayers before. "We've got to push forward anyway," Musk said, his voice filled with determination. "This is a moment that can define the next century. If we wait for the perfect conditions, we'll never get anything done. Our job is to lead, and to show the government and the public why this transition is essential." Linda nodded, but there was a certain level of concern in her expression. "I agree, but we need to be careful how we frame our arguments. The public's opinion is still divided. Many people see the transition to electric vehicles and renewable energy as necessary, but they don't yet fully understand the logistics. The idea of self-driving vehicles is exciting, but it's also terrifying for a lot of people. We can't just focus on the technology. We need to help people understand why it's better for them." Musk took a deep breath. It was true. The technology was only half the battle. People were scared of what they didn't understand. He had always been able to rally his teams with enthusiasm, but now he had to think bigger. How could he make the government and the public see the grand vision behind his companies? "We need to talk about the human element," Musk said, pacing around the room as he spoke. "When we're talking about self-driving cars, we can't just sell them on the idea that they're cool or futuristic. We need to show the safety benefits, how they can reduce accidents, improve traffic flow, and save lives. We need to focus on how these technologies will make society safer, more efficient, and more equitable." He stopped pacing and turned to face the team. "And we need to be strategic about how we align ourselves with government priorities. We're not just a private company. We're partners in building the future. If we want this vision to succeed, we have to position ourselves as the leaders who can help the government reach its goals on climate change, energy independence, and infrastructure modernization." Linda smiled slightly. "That's exactly what we've been working on. We've compiled data that shows how Tesla's vehicles and energy solutions are already helping reduce carbon emissions. We've also identified potential collaborations between Tesla and government projects to modernize the power grid, improve public transportation systems, and make cities more sustainable." Musk felt a surge of confidence. This was it. This was the real opportunity, not just to change the car industry, but to change the fabric of modern society. The road ahead would be full of challenges, but it was clear that Musk had built a team that could handle them. They weren't just thinking about cars and rockets anymore. They were thinking about how to reshape entire industries and create a sustainable future. The meeting that followed with government officials would be crucial. It wasn't just about defending his companies. It was about changing the way policymakers thought about energy, transportation, and the environment. And Musk knew he needed to bring his A-game to that table. The day before the meeting, Musk spent hours reviewing the proposals and data points, fine-tuning the message that he would present. He wanted to make sure that every statistic, every argument, and every piece of information would resonate with the people in that room. But he also knew that, at the end of the day, he had to be true to his own vision. He had to speak from the heart and convince them not just with facts, but with passion. The morning of the meeting arrived. Musk stood at the head of a sleek conference table in a government building in Washington, D.C., flanked by his team and a group of senior lawmakers. The room was filled with tension. This was it, the moment where the fate of Tesla's future and, perhaps, the future of sustainable transportation would be determined. As he took his seat and began his presentation, Musk could feel the weight of the moment. But he was calm. He had prepared for this. He wasn't going to let fear, uncertainty, or the weight of past mistakes hold him back. He was going to do what he had always done best, lead. The meeting began. The room was filled with quiet chatter, the hum of anticipation hanging in the air. Elon Musk could feel the eyes of the government officials and industry experts on him as he stood at the head of the table, preparing to present his vision for the future of transportation and sustainable energy. His team sat behind him, quietly ready to support his every word. But this was Musk's moment. The stakes were higher than ever before. If he could convince these officials, it would be a turning point, not just for Tesla, but for the entire world. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and began. "Thank you all for taking the time to meet today. I know we're all here because we share a common goal, creating a sustainable, efficient, and equitable future for our country, and in fact, for the world." He paused, letting his words sink in. But the challenge we face is how to make that future a reality. We need to rethink how we move, how we power our cities, and how we reduce our impact on the environment. Musk felt the weight of his words. He knew these conversations were difficult. Many of the people around the table were entrenched in the traditional ways of doing things, the fossil fuel industry, old infrastructure, and outdated policies. But Musk had never been one to shy away from a challenge. If anyone could convince them, it was him. He continued, his voice steady but passionate. At Tesla, we're not just making electric cars. We're building a complete ecosystem for sustainable living. Our vehicles, our solar products, and our energy storage solutions are designed to work together seamlessly. We're creating the foundation for a transportation revolution, one that's built on renewable energy, safety, and innovation. He clicked the remote in his hand, and the first slide appeared on the screen behind him. It showed a diagram of Tesla's integrated energy and transportation systems. Solar panels on rooftops, electric vehicles charging themselves, batteries storing excess energy, and autonomous vehicles zipping through city streets. As you can see, Musk continued, the potential for this technology is enormous. By integrating renewable energy with our vehicles and infrastructure, we can drastically reduce carbon emissions, increase energy efficiency, and create a safer, more sustainable future for all. Musk looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the key decision-makers. He could sense the skepticism, the cautious optimism mixed with hesitation. They wanted to believe, but they needed more. They needed proof. Musk knew that the technology alone wasn't going to win them over. He needed to show them why it made sense, for the economy, for jobs, for energy independence, and most importantly, for the future of the planet. Take a look at these numbers, he said, as the next slide appeared. It displayed projections for the environmental impact of adopting electric vehicles and renewable energy at scale. How many tons of CO2 could be reduced? How many jobs could be created? How much energy could be saved? We've already seen what happens when people switch to electric vehicles, Musk said. Tesla's fleet alone has saved over 10 million metric tons of CO2 emissions. And if we scale this technology, if we can work together to make it the standard, we're looking at a world where transportation no longer relies on fossil fuels, where cities are powered by clean energy, and where safety and efficiency aren't just goals, but realities. The room fell silent as the numbers hung in the air. Musk could see the wheels turning in the minds of the officials. They weren't just seeing the tech anymore. They were seeing the bigger picture. But there was one more hurdle to overcome: the political and economic realities. Musk shifted gears. I know this sounds ambitious. There are concerns about infrastructure, about jobs in the traditional auto and energy sectors, about the cost of making such a massive transition. But we've already begun addressing these challenges. He glanced over at his team, signaling for the next slide. This one highlighted Tesla's plans to build a nationwide network of charging stations, the partnerships they had forged with local governments to modernize the grid, and the research that was already underway to improve battery efficiency and storage capacity. We're not just waiting for the world to change, Musk said with confidence. We're actively making it happen. We've already laid the groundwork for a nationwide electric vehicle charging infrastructure. We're working on expanding our solar and energy storage capabilities. And we're committed to supporting the workforce of the future by creating new, high-tech jobs in energy and transportation sectors. The officials in the room exchanged looks. This was the piece they had been waiting for. How would the transition affect the economy and their constituents? Would it create jobs or destroy them? Could Tesla really follow through with such a large-scale vision? Musk wasn't finished. He leaned in, his gaze intense. Look, I understand that this is a leap of faith, but we have a chance here to do something unprecedented, something that could lead the world toward a more sustainable, prosperous future. We have the technology, we have the expertise, and most importantly, we have the will to succeed. Musk let the silence linger for a moment, allowing his words to resonate. Now, I'm not asking for handouts, he continued. What I'm asking for is partnership. We need to work together to create the right policies, the right incentives, and the right infrastructure to make this vision a reality. But if we do this, if we take this step together, I promise you, the future will be brighter, cleaner, and safer than anything we've ever imagined. The room was still. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, one of the senior lawmakers, a woman in her early 50s, broke the silence. "Elon," she said, her tone serious but thoughtful. "This is impressive, but I think we all know the reality. There are a lot of hurdles in front of us. There's no guarantee that we'll be able to change things on such a large scale. But what you're saying resonates. We need innovation. We need a plan for the future. And we need to act now." Musk nodded, sensing the shift in the room. He wasn't naive enough to think that this meeting would result in an immediate agreement, but he knew they were moving in the right direction. They had listened. They had seen the potential. After a few more hours of discussion, the meeting adjourned. The officials were cautiously optimistic, agreeing to move forward with discussions about the specific policies that would be needed to facilitate Tesla's plans. It wasn't a done deal, not yet, but it was a step in the right direction. As Musk walked out of the building with his team, the weight of the meeting hung in the air. There was still a long way to go, but for the first time in a long while, he felt the excitement of possibility. He had faced resistance, but he had also seen the cracks begin to form in the walls of the old guard. And once those walls began to crumble, there would be no stopping the tide of change. The following weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and strategy sessions. Musk's presentation to the government had sparked a ripple effect, and while it hadn't immediately resulted in any groundbreaking legislation or policy changes, the dialogue had begun. The officials were listening, and the conversation had shifted. The possibility of widespread adoption of sustainable technologies was no longer a fringe idea, it was on the table. Musk, however, knew that this momentum had to be maintained. He had always thrived in the fast-paced world of innovation, but now he was diving into a different challenge entirely: politics. The stakes were higher, and the road to success was much more complex than simply launching a new product or technology. He needed to navigate the intricacies of political negotiations, manage relationships with regulators, and work with various industries whose interests often didn't align with his vision. Despite the complexity, Musk felt a surge of excitement. This wasn't just about Tesla or SpaceX anymore. This was about an entire shift in how the world thought about energy, transportation, and even how people lived. He wasn't just disrupting industries, he was challenging a decades-old status quo. Late one evening, after another round of discussions with his advisors, Musk sat alone in his office, staring out at the skyline of the city. The lights were twinkling below, a reminder of how far he'd come, and yet how much farther there was to go. For all his success, for all the accolades and groundbreaking accomplishments, Musk knew that real change required more than just innovation. It required a shift in how society operated. And that shift had to be managed carefully, with precision. He sat at his desk, reviewing the latest polling data and public sentiment around electric vehicles, renewable energy, and self-driving technology. The numbers were encouraging, but Musk knew that public opinion could be fickle. The same people who cheered on his companies today could just as easily turn against them tomorrow. He had seen it happen before, whether it was Tesla's rocky start or SpaceX's early failures. But this time was different. The world was changing. The need for sustainable solutions was growing by the day. People were beginning to see the value in clean energy, and self-driving cars were starting to feel less like a futuristic pipe dream and more like a tangible reality. The public wasn't just buying products. They were buying into a vision. And that vision, Musk knew, was the key to making real change. As he leaned back in his chair, his phone buzzed with a new message from Linda. The text was simple but important. "Elon, we've got a new challenge. The oil industry isn't staying quiet. We've got a lot of pushback coming from the Senate. We need a strategy." Musk read the message, then set his phone down, taking a deep breath. The fight had only just begun. The oil and gas industry had deep roots in Washington, and they weren't going to give up their dominance without a fight. But Musk wasn't afraid. He had faced powerful adversaries before, and he had come out on top. This was no different. He immediately called Linda. "Get me a meeting with the key Senate members. We need to open up the conversation. Show them that we're not just a competitor, we're a partner. If they want to keep America ahead in the global race for clean energy, they need to understand that we're the future." Linda's voice was steady, but there was a hint of concern. "We can make the case for renewable energy, Elon, but it's going to be hard. The oil lobby has a lot of power, and they'll fight tooth and nail to protect their interests. Musk's gaze hardened as he looked out the window. He wasn't backing down. I know, but we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here. The world is at a crossroads, and if we don't act now, we could lose it all to those who are more interested in maintaining the status quo than in making real progress. He knew that pushing for renewable energy and electric vehicles meant challenging entrenched interests. But he also knew that he had one advantage that few others in history had: a vision for the future that was so bold, so compelling, that it couldn't be ignored forever. The following days were a blur of strategy meetings, briefings, and conference calls with key figures in Washington. Musk's team worked tirelessly to draft proposals, build alliances, and prepare the arguments that would be needed to sway the Senate. He knew that he couldn't do this alone. He needed the support of influential politicians, experts in policy, and a public that was increasingly vocal in their support for cleaner energy. Finally, after days of tense preparation, Musk was ready for the next round of meetings in Washington. This time, it wasn't just about presenting Tesla's innovations. It was about defending a new future, one where the government played an active role in facilitating the transition to sustainable technologies. He arrived at the Capitol building, his mind focused and sharp. The tension was palpable as he stepped into the room, where a group of powerful senators and their staff were waiting. These were the gatekeepers of change, the people who could either pave the way for a new era of clean energy or dig in their heels and keep things exactly as they were. Musk knew that this was a pivotal moment. His pitch had to be flawless. "Thank you all for meeting with me today," Musk began, as he stood before the panel of senators. "I understand that the future of energy and transportation is a complex issue, and I'm here to have an open, honest conversation about how we can work together to move the country and the world forward." He laid out Tesla's vision once more: a world where sustainable energy powered the grid, electric vehicles replaced gasoline-powered cars, and autonomous vehicles made travel safer and more efficient. He emphasized the environmental benefits, the job creation, and the economic potential of the green revolution. "I'm not here to vilify anyone or to create division," Musk said, his voice steady. "I'm here to show you how we can work together to ensure America remains a leader in the global energy market. We have the technology, the expertise, and the drive to make this happen. But we need the government's support to ensure that we're not held back by outdated regulations and policies." As he spoke, Musk could sense the room's mood shifting. He wasn't just selling products anymore. He was offering a partnership. He was showing them that Tesla was more than just a business. It was a movement. After an hour of discussion, the meeting came to a close. The senators thanked him for his time, and Musk left the room feeling cautiously optimistic. He knew that the road ahead would still be full of obstacles, but he also knew that the seeds of change had been planted. The fight wasn't over, but Musk had taken a significant step forward. The oil lobby had its influence, but Tesla had something the oil industry couldn't compete with: an undeniable vision of the future. As Musk walked back to his car, he felt the weight of the moment, knowing that he was leading a revolution. This was just the beginning, but in that moment, the possibilities felt endless. After Musk's meetings with the Senate, things began to intensify. The political landscape shifted, but so did the opposition. As expected, the oil industry wasn't going to back down quietly. Their lobbyists were working overtime, trying to prevent any significant legislative changes that could undermine their stranglehold on the energy sector. The media echoed their concerns, and soon, the political climate was filled with heated rhetoric. The stakes had been raised, and Musk knew the battle was far from over. The next few weeks were a constant barrage of debates, media campaigns, and unexpected challenges. The oil industry, backed by decades of political influence, had begun a public relations campaign aimed at discrediting Musk and Tesla's push for renewable energy. Headlines in major newspapers began questioning whether Tesla's vision was practical. Was it too idealistic? Could the country really make the transition to electric vehicles on such a massive scale? And was Musk's technology as reliable as he claimed? At the same time, Musk's team was navigating a delicate balance. They needed to defend Tesla's innovations, while also keeping the public focused on the broader goal: a cleaner, more sustainable future. This wasn't just about Tesla anymore. It was about the future of the planet. And Musk wasn't about to let the naysayers derail the movement. One evening, As Musk was reviewing the latest news on his phone, Linda walked into his office. The look on her face was serious. She had something important to discuss. "Elon," she said, sitting down across from him, "it's getting worse. The oil lobby has launched a full-scale attack on us. They've started a smear campaign, casting doubt on the reliability of our cars and energy products. They're even saying that self-driving cars are dangerous and that we're endangering people's lives." Musk's jaw tightened. He had known this was coming, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. The media was his enemy right now, and it wasn't going to be enough to simply prove his technology was working. They were going to have to fight back in ways he hadn't anticipated. "We need to respond," Musk said, his voice firm. "We can't let them control the narrative. If we stay quiet, it will look like we have something to hide. We need to double down on our transparency. Show the world the real benefits of what we're doing." Linda nodded. "I agree. We've already had some public demonstrations of the safety features in Tesla's self-driving cars. But we need more. We need real-time data, and we need to involve experts who can speak to the safety of our vehicles and the environmental impact of our energy products. We need to counter their narrative with facts." Musk ran a hand through his hair. He had always been good at handling the media, but this time it felt different. The stakes were higher, the opposition was more organized, and the pressure was mounting. Yet, he had been through worse. He had faced bankruptcy with Tesla. He had been laughed at when he launched SpaceX. And somehow, each time, he came out stronger. "We need a game plan," Musk said, standing up. "Get our best engineers and safety experts on a presentation. We'll host a live-streamed event where we can show the world how safe our self-driving cars really are. We'll bring in independent third-party experts, someone like the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and we'll prove the reliability of our vehicles." Linda looked thoughtful. "That's a good idea, but we'll also need to address the environmental arguments head-on. We can't just focus on the cars. We need to show that the entire system, electric vehicles, energy storage, and solar, is the future. We'll need to show how much cleaner our technology is compared to the fossil fuel industry." Musk nodded, already planning the details in his head. He knew it wasn't going to be easy, but it was a fight worth having. He had to remind the world what Tesla was doing, not just for the company, but for the entire planet. The following week, Musk and his team hosted a live-streamed event that would go down in history as a turning point for Tesla. The stage was set in a large Tesla showroom, the sleek cars lined up in perfect rows, showcasing the latest advancements in the company's self-driving technology and energy solutions. It wasn't just a product demonstration. It was a full-scale defense of Tesla's mission. The live stream began, and Musk took to the stage, standing confidently in front of a sleek Model S. The cameras zoomed in on him as he began speaking. "Good evening, everyone," Musk began, his voice calm yet powerful. "Tonight, we're going to show you why Tesla is leading the charge in creating a sustainable future. The critics would have you believe that our technology is dangerous, impractical, or unreliable. But tonight, we're going to put that all to rest." The crowd was quiet, hanging on his every word. Behind him, a series of Tesla vehicles were on display, each equipped with the latest software upgrades and self-driving capabilities. Musk turned toward the first car and gestured for one of the engineers to take the wheel. "This is our Tesla Model X, and as you can see, it's fully equipped with our latest autopilot technology. But rather than tell you about it, we're going to show you." A few moments later, the car began to move autonomously, navigating through the showroom floor with ease. It slowed for obstacles, adjusted speed when necessary, and even made a perfect parallel park, all without human intervention. The crowd gasped in awe. Musk turned back to the audience. "Our cars are safer than traditional vehicles. In fact, research from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration shows that Tesla vehicles are involved in fewer accidents than their conventional counterparts. And the data speaks for itself. Self-driving cars aren't just the future. They're the safer, smarter alternative to human-driven vehicles." But Musk didn't stop there. He moved on to the energy side of the business, unveiling a new partnership with several independent environmental organizations. Together, they presented data showing how Tesla's energy storage systems and solar products were already making a tangible impact on reducing carbon emissions. The numbers were staggering. Tesla had already helped remove millions of tons of CO2 from the atmosphere, and their plans for the future could make that number exponentially higher. "We're not just a car company," Musk said, his voice gaining intensity. "We're a global energy solution, and together, we can change the world." The live stream had an immediate impact. Social media was flooded with support from environmental activists, clean energy advocates, and Tesla fans. The media coverage was intense, with experts weighing in on the implications of Musk's claims. Despite the oil industry's best efforts, the narrative was shifting. More and more people were beginning to see Tesla for what it truly was, a company with the power to change the world. The oil lobby was still pushing back, of course. The battle was far from over. But for the first time, Musk felt that the tide was beginning to turn. The world was listening, and the momentum was on his side. The shift in power had begun. Elon Musk's phone buzzed incessantly as he paced around his office, watching the latest headlines flood his screen. After the live-streamed event, Tesla's stock had surged, and the media's tone had shifted. Musk knew the narrative was turning in his favor, but he also knew that the oil industry wasn't going to roll over just because of a few successful presentations. The battle was far from won, but the momentum had shifted. The tide was beginning to turn. Linda walked in with a thick folder of press clippings and a fresh batch of data reports. She placed them on the desk, and Musk glanced at her, noting her serious expression. "What's the latest?" he asked, still pacing, though his mind was racing through possible next steps. He needed to keep pushing forward. This was just one victory in a much larger war. "We've got some surprising numbers," Linda said, tapping the folder. "The public's support for clean energy is at an all-time high, but the pushback from the oil lobby is escalating. We knew they'd try to discredit us, but it's getting uglier. They've started launching personal attacks against you, Elon. They're digging up everything from your past." Musk paused, rubbing his eyes. He had seen this before. When someone was desperate, they went for the personal attacks. But it was the nature of the game. He couldn't afford to let it distract him now. "We knew this was coming," he said with a sigh. "I've faced worse. Let them throw whatever they've got at me. We have the truth on our side." Linda nodded, but there was a hint of concern in her voice. "It's not just the media. Some of the senators we spoke to have started to backtrack. There's a real fear now that the political landscape could turn against us." Musk's mind sharpened at the mention of the Senate. That was the next major battleground. Without the support of key lawmakers, Tesla's future and the future of clean energy could be delayed or derailed entirely. He had seen how quickly the political tide could change, and if the oil lobby's influence spread, everything they had worked for could be undone. "We need to play it smart," Musk said, his eyes hardening with resolve. "We have the public on our side. We need to rally that support. If we can get people behind us in numbers big enough, the politicians will have no choice but to listen. We'll keep pushing with new data, new solutions, and a clear vision for the future." As he spoke, Musk could already feel the gears turning in his head. They needed to take the fight directly to the heart of Washington. It wasn't enough to simply defend Tesla. They needed to show that clean energy was a critical national interest. They needed to frame the debate as a matter of national security, economic prosperity, and global competitiveness. But Musk knew that he couldn't do this alone. He needed more than just facts and figures. He needed to make clean energy a cause that the public could rally behind. They needed to see that supporting Tesla wasn't just about electric cars, it was about the future of the country. The next morning, Musk convened a meeting with his senior leadership team. Sitting around the table, he outlined his vision. "We need to show that this is about more than just Tesla," he said, pacing again. "It's about the future of the American economy, energy independence, and global leadership. If we win this fight, we don't just change the car industry, we change the entire energy landscape. The future of transportation, the future of energy, is electric. And it's going to happen with or without Washington's support. But I'd prefer to have them on our side." His team nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Musk had always been good at rallying people behind his ideas, and now was no different. The weight of his words hung in the air. This wasn't just another project. It was the future of civilization as they knew it. Over the following weeks, Musk worked with the PR team to develop a campaign that framed clean energy as a patriotic cause. They focused on the economic benefits, job creation in green energy, the future of American manufacturing, and the promise of energy independence. Tesla released new data showing that their electric cars and solar products could save consumers thousands of dollars over their lifetime, making them not just environmentally responsible but financially sensible. They also started emphasizing Tesla's role in helping America compete globally, positioning the company as a leader in the energy race. But the oil lobby wasn't backing down. The attacks continued, intensifying as Tesla gained traction. Politicians who had previously supported Musk's vision began to waver, publicly distancing themselves from the push for clean energy. It was time to up the ante. Musk turned to the one asset that no one had fully realized the power of: social media. He had already built a massive following, but now he would use it to mobilize his base. His Twitter feed became a battleground. Every statement, every piece of data, every victory was broadcast directly to millions of people. The stakes couldn't have been higher. He had to win over the hearts and minds of the public, not just to support Tesla, but to demand action from their government. One day, Musk tweeted a simple message: America has always led the world in innovation. Clean energy is the next frontier. We cannot afford to fall behind. The response was immediate. Tens of thousands of retweets, hundreds of thousands of likes, and messages of support poured in. Musk's message had struck a chord with the public. They weren't just interested in clean energy, they were starting to see it as a matter of national pride. As the weeks passed, the pressure on politicians mounted. Constituents were calling their representatives, demanding that they support the transition to clean energy. And as the public's demand grew louder, even the most reluctant politicians began to listen. Then came the breakthrough. Musk was invited to speak before Congress in a historic hearing on energy policy. It was a chance for him to make his case directly to the lawmakers who had the power to shape the future of clean energy in America. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The hearing room was packed with representatives from all sides of the political spectrum. The tension was palpable as Musk took his seat before the committee. He knew that this wasn't just another speech. It was his chance to change the game. He looked out at the room full of lawmakers and began speaking. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. The transition to clean energy is not just an environmental issue. It's a matter of national security, economic growth, and global leadership. America has always been a beacon of innovation, and now we have the opportunity to lead the world once again in creating a sustainable future. The room was silent as Musk laid out his vision. He didn't just talk about Tesla's products. He spoke about a future where America no longer relied on foreign oil, where clean energy was affordable, and where American workers led the charge in building the infrastructure for a new energy era. He explained how the transition to electric vehicles, renewable energy, and energy storage could revitalize American manufacturing and create millions of new jobs. Musk's words were calculated, powerful, and persuasive. He wasn't just appealing to their sense of duty. He was appealing to their ambition, to their desire to ensure that America remained a global leader in the 21st century. By the end of the hearing, several key members of Congress had shifted their positions. The conversation had changed. The resistance was beginning to break down. Musk smiled to himself as he left the room. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had officially turned. He had made his case. Now, it was time to watch the shift happen. Musk stood at his desk, staring out of the window of his office, overlooking the sprawling Tesla campus. It was a clear day, and the sun was shining brightly, casting its rays across the electric cars parked outside. A sense of calm settled over him, but he knew better than to get too comfortable. The battle he had waged in front of Congress was just one piece of the larger puzzle. The next phase was already beginning, and it was going to be a tough fight. In the days following the congressional hearing, the response from the public had been overwhelmingly positive. Tesla's stock continued to rise, and social media exploded with support for Musk's push toward clean energy. But as the support grew, so did the opposition. The oil lobby had deep pockets, and they weren't about to let Tesla's momentum slide without a fight. Behind closed doors, the lobbyists were working overtime, pressuring lawmakers, strategizing with media outlets, and organizing smear campaigns. Their influence was still substantial, and they knew how to play dirty. One evening, Musk met with Linda in the Tesla cafeteria, the place where they often discussed the latest challenges in a more informal setting. Linda had a folder with her, which she placed on the table between them. Elon, you need to see this, she said, her tone serious. Musk opened the folder to find a series of articles, all focused on recent attacks aimed directly at him. The headlines were alarming. Musk's Mars dreams are a distraction. What about Earth? The Tesla billionaire's war on big oil might just backfire, and Elon Musk, a dangerous visionary or a modern-day hero? They're playing the long game, Linda said. They've started targeting you personally again. They're using your ambitious goals, SpaceX, Mars, colonization, to paint you as someone out of touch with the realities of the world. They're saying that your focus on Mars is taking resources and attention away from Earth's immediate problems. Musk sighed, leaning back in his chair. I expected this. They've been trying to undermine me for years, ever since I started SpaceX. It's all about creating doubt. They don't want the world to see me as a leader. They want to discredit me. Linda nodded. Exactly. And now they're taking a new approach. They're not just attacking your products. They're attacking your character. They're calling you reckless, saying you're too focused on the future to care about the people suffering today. Musk rubbed his eyes, processing the weight of what Linda was telling him. This was the kind of tactic that could get under anyone's skin, especially if it started to gain traction. They've underestimated the one thing they can't control, Musk said, his voice steady but tinged with a hint of defiance. Public opinion. I know the media loves to sensationalize things, but the people are smarter than they think. If we keep pushing the message, if we keep showing them the benefits, they'll come around. Linda wasn't as optimistic. It's not just the media anymore, Elon. They've got money, power, and connections in Washington. If the pressure gets too high, we could lose our political allies. And we can't afford that. Musk looked at her, his expression hardening. We won't lose them. Not if we keep fighting the right fight. We're not just trying to sell cars, Linda. We're trying to change the world. The oil lobby can attack me all they want, but the people are with us. Still, Linda had a point. The political pressure was starting to have an effect. Musk's recent trip to Washington had garnered a lot of attention, and the lawmakers who had initially shown support for Tesla were now beginning to backpedal. Some were issuing statements distancing themselves from Musk's radical vision of a clean energy future. A new bill was introduced in the Senate, one that would slow down the transition to electric vehicles by imposing stricter regulations on companies like Tesla. It was a clear shot across the bow, a warning to Musk that the fight was far from over. And while the bill was far from passing, it was the beginning of what could turn into a long, drawn-out battle. The coming days would be critical. Musk knew that if he let up now, the opposition would only gain more ground. He needed to act fast, to show that the clean energy movement wasn't just a niche idea, it was the future of the country. But there was a sense of urgency in his chest now. He knew the stakes had never been higher. Tesla had begun the fight for a sustainable future, but now it was fighting for its own survival. That night, Musk couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, his mind spinning with all the possibilities of what could go wrong. The oil industry was like a juggernaut, an immovable force built on years of power and influence. But Musk wasn't someone who took defeat lying down. He had always believed in the power of bold ideas. And now, he was about to take one of the biggest risks of his life. The next morning, Musk called a meeting with his top advisors. He was determined to take the fight to the next level, and this time, he would use the very weapon that had given him an edge in the first place, his vision. We need to hit back with something they can't ignore, Musk said, his tone unshakable. We're not going to win this battle by playing their game. We're going to make a new game altogether. We're going to show the world why clean energy is not just important, it's the only option. Linda raised an eyebrow. What do you have in mind? Musk smiled. It's time to make some noise. Let's go bigger, way bigger. I'm talking about a nationwide push to make electric vehicles mandatory. We're going to frame it not just as a climate change issue, but as an economic issue, as a health issue. We're going to make the people understand that clean energy isn't just the future. It's the future we can't afford to ignore any longer. The room fell silent as everyone processed Musk's words. It was a bold idea, one that could change everything. But it was also risky. It would alienate a lot of people, including those in Washington who had already expressed doubts about the rapid transition to clean energy. But Musk didn't care about the risks. He cared about one thing: winning. He wasn't going to back down now, not when the finish line was finally in sight. "We're going to push this hard," Musk continued. "We'll take this fight to every state, every city. We'll get the people involved. We'll organize rallies, town halls, and petitions. If we can't change the laws from the top down, we'll do it from the ground up." Linda looked at him, a new sense of determination in her eyes. "Let's make it happen." Musk knew it wouldn't be easy. He was about to face the fight of his life, but there was no turning back. He was about to launch the most aggressive public campaign Tesla had ever seen, and this time, he wasn't just fighting for his company. He was fighting for the future of the planet. And this time, the world would listen. Elon Musk's idea was big, audacious, and exactly what the world needed. As soon as he shared his plan with his leadership team, the energy in the room shifted. This wasn't just another PR campaign. It wasn't just about Tesla. It was about galvanizing a nationwide movement, a mission to redefine the future of transportation, energy, and the environment. The plan was set into motion quickly. The first step was to get the public on board. Tesla's social media team, led by the savvy and creative Isabella, worked overtime to create a compelling narrative. They produced powerful videos and graphics that linked clean energy to everything people cared about: jobs, health, security, and the future of their children. The campaign emphasized that clean energy wasn't just a choice. It was a necessity for a prosperous future. Musk knew that making the transition to electric vehicles mandatory wasn't going to be easy. He was asking a nation to take a leap of faith. It was a bold move, and he knew that the political establishment wasn't going to simply roll over and support him. In fact, it was likely that most politicians would fight back hard. That's why, alongside the media blitz, Musk was also preparing to take his message straight to the people. "We're not waiting for the government to act," he told his team in a meeting. "We're going to give the people the power. If we can get enough people behind this, the lawmakers will have no choice but to listen." The first major event Musk organized was a rally in Los Angeles, strategically timed to coincide with a global climate summit. The event was designed to capture the world's attention, and it did. Thousands of Tesla owners, clean energy advocates, and ordinary citizens turned out to support the cause. There were banners, speeches, and an electrifying atmosphere. Musk spoke about the economic, environmental, and health benefits of transitioning to electric vehicles and renewable energy sources. He made it clear that Tesla wasn't just a car company. It was leading the charge in the future of the planet. But it wasn't just about the rally itself. Musk used the event to announce a new initiative, a nationwide petition demanding that the U.S. government make electric vehicles the standard by 2035. It wasn't a small ask. It was a commitment that would require drastic changes to infrastructure, regulation, and industry standards. But Musk knew that with enough public pressure, the government would have to act. The petition was launched online with an aggressive social media campaign, and within days, millions of people signed up in support of the initiative. It was quickly trending worldwide. People were sharing their reasons for signing. Some wanted cleaner air for their children, others were motivated by the promise of green jobs, and many simply believed in the power of innovation. Tesla's support base was growing, faster than Musk had ever anticipated. The movement was no longer about Tesla's vehicles or Elon Musk's ambitions. It was about the future of the planet. And this was the tipping point. As the momentum built, pressure started mounting on the lawmakers who had distanced themselves from Musk. Some began to see the writing on the wall. Public opinion was shifting, and the people were demanding change. But, as Musk knew, there were still powerful forces working against them. The oil industry, in particular, was not going to sit idly by. They had already launched a counteroffensive, ramping up their lobbying efforts and using their media influence to spread doubt. They created ads that falsely claimed electric vehicles were just a fad, and that the costs of transitioning were too high. In Congress, oil-backed senators started working on bills that would directly oppose Tesla's efforts. They painted the electric vehicle transition as an unrealistic and dangerous gamble. The stage was set for a showdown. One morning, just a week after the rally, Musk received an unexpected call. It was from a senator he had worked with in the past, Senator William Hayes. Hayes was a key figure in the ongoing energy debates and had previously been an ally. Musk had always seen him as a reasonable politician, someone who could understand the need for change. But now, Hayes was on the fence. The pressure from the oil lobby had reached a boiling point, and he was under heavy scrutiny. Elon, Hayes said, his voice tight. I've been getting some serious heat from the oil industry. They're threatening to pull funding for my re-election campaign unless I back off this clean energy push. You know I believe in what you're doing, but this is bigger than just one election. The oil money is powerful, and it's not something I can ignore. Musk paused, feeling a sense of betrayal creeping in, but he knew how politics worked. He had seen this play out before. You've known me for years, Senator. You know what I stand for. You know what's at stake here. The oil industry has been in charge for far too long, and the people are ready for change. If we don't take action now, the planet's future will be at risk. Don't let them use their money to control your vote. Hayes sighed deeply. I know, Elon. Believe me, I do. But I'm in a tough spot. The pressure's coming from all sides. I just don't know how much longer I can stand firm on this. Musk's voice softened, but remained resolute. The pressure will pass. You know what's right, and so do I. You have the power to lead. But you need to make a choice, whether you're going to protect the status quo, or whether you're going to stand up for the future. This is bigger than any election, Senator. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Hayes spoke. I'll see what I can do. But you need to understand, this fight is about to get a lot harder. Musk hung up the phone, his heart heavy with the weight of the struggle ahead. He knew that winning over one senator wasn't enough. This battle would take everything he had, and he needed to ensure that his message reached every corner of the country. And so, Musk doubled down. He made appearances across the country, speaking at universities, in front of business groups, and in towns large and small. Everywhere he went, the message was the same. The future was electric, and America had to lead the way. In the background, his PR team worked around the clock to keep the momentum going. Videos of Musk's speeches, testimonials from Tesla owners, and clips of the rallies were broadcast on social media, rallying more people to sign the petition and demand action from their lawmakers. Every day, the pressure grew, and every day, the oil industry fought harder to maintain its grip. But Musk had one thing the oil industry didn't: the power of innovation. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a visionary. And the world was watching. As the battle between Musk and the oil lobby continued to intensify, the stakes couldn't have been higher. The petition calling for a nationwide transition to electric vehicles by 2035 had gathered over 20 million signatures, and public sentiment was firmly on Musk's side. However, this surge in support came with its own set of challenges. The oil industry had launched a fierce counteroffensive, deploying their vast resources to create an alternative narrative. Their ads flooded television and social media, attempting to scare the public into thinking that the transition would cripple the economy and lead to mass job losses. But Musk was not about to be silenced. The pressure from both the public and the oil lobby had reached a boiling point. In the halls of Congress, the battle lines were drawn. On one side stood the growing movement led by Musk, advocating for a clean energy future and a bold shift toward electric vehicles. On the other stood the entrenched interests of the fossil fuel industry, whose influence over lawmakers had deep roots in decades of political contributions and lobbying. It was a week before the critical Senate vote on the new energy bill, the one that would determine whether the country would commit to a clean energy future or remain shackled to the status quo. Musk knew that if he didn't act decisively now, the momentum could be lost. He needed to show the world that his vision wasn't just a pipe dream. It was a necessity for the survival of the planet. Musk had always been known for his unorthodox methods, and this time, he was prepared to go even further than he had before. Late one night, as Musk sat in his office reviewing documents, Linda walked in, a concerned look on her face. She placed a file on his desk and sat across from him. "Elon, we need to talk," she said, her voice serious. "The vote's coming up in just a few days, and we're not in the clear yet. I've spoken to a few of our allies in Congress, and it looks like there's a lot of uncertainty. Some of them are starting to waver, and we can't afford that." Musk looked up from the file and locked eyes with her. "I know, but we've come too far to back down now. The oil industry is throwing everything they have at us, but we can't let them win." Linda hesitated. "I agree with you, but there's something else. The media is starting to turn against us. Some of the more conservative outlets are framing this as an elitist agenda. something that only affects the rich and that will leave ordinary Americans behind. We need to counter that narrative fast. Musk leaned forward, his mind racing. He had anticipated this kind of backlash, but hearing it confirmed made it even more real. The media had become a battleground in its own right, and if Tesla lost control of the narrative, it could spell disaster. "I have an idea," Musk said, his voice tinged with determination. "It's time for us to take a stand, publicly and boldly. We need to show people that this is not just about electric vehicles. This is about saving their homes, their families, and their future. It's time to put a face to the movement." Linda looked puzzled but intrigued. "What do you have in mind?" Musk stood up and walked over to the window, looking out over the city below. "We're going to do something radical, something that will force everyone to pay attention." The next day, Musk made an unprecedented announcement. He would personally take part in a live televised debate with the leaders of the oil industry. It would be broadcast to millions of viewers across the nation. Musk was determined to face his critics head-on, to show the world that his vision was not only viable but essential. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours, news outlets and social media were buzzing with excitement. The debate would pit Musk, the visionary CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, against the powerful executives of the oil giants, men and women who had spent their careers defending the status quo. It was set to be a historic showdown. The oil lobby, of course, was not pleased with Musk's decision. They tried to pressure the networks to back out, arguing that a debate with Musk would be a waste of time and a threat to their interests. But Musk's team had already negotiated the terms, and the broadcast was set. It was a risk, but one that Musk was willing to take. The night of the debate arrived. The stage was set in a grand studio, with a massive audience and cameras poised to capture every moment. Musk sat backstage, preparing himself. He knew this was his chance to make the case for a clean energy future in front of the entire nation. The stakes were high, but he was determined to make the most of it. The debate began with opening statements. The oil executives took their turns, each one trying to portray the clean energy movement as unrealistic and threatening to American jobs. They argued that transitioning away from fossil fuels too quickly would lead to economic collapse, unemployment, and higher energy costs for everyday people. Their message was clear. The world wasn't ready for such a radical shift, and it would be disastrous to try. When Musk took the stage, he didn't waste any time. He went straight to the heart of the issue. "This isn't about what's comfortable or easy," Musk began, his voice strong and clear. "This is about the future. It's about protecting the future of our children, our planet, and our way of life. We've been dependent on fossil fuels for too long, and we all know that they're not sustainable. The question is not whether we can afford the transition, it's whether we can afford to wait." The crowd was silent. Musk's words hung in the air, and the oil executives shifted in their seats. They had heard this argument before, but it had never been framed so passionately, so urgently. Musk continued, his tone unwavering. "The reality is, the future of energy is clean, it's renewable, and it's inevitable. We can either embrace it now, or we can be left behind. But the planet can't afford to wait." The debate raged on for hours, with both sides arguing their points. But by the end of it, it was clear that Musk had won the public's favor. The emotional appeal, the urgency in his voice, it resonated with people. They saw in Musk a man who wasn't just talking about a better future, he was fighting for it, against all odds. As the debate concluded, the media reaction was immediate. News outlets across the country declared Musk the victor, and the hashtag #CleanEnergyNow began trending worldwide. The movement had reached a tipping point. Public opinion was firmly in Musk's corner, and even some lawmakers who had been on the fence began to reconsider their positions. The oil lobby had underestimated Musk's resolve, and now it was too late. The momentum was irreversible. Musk's bold move had changed everything. The debate was a turning point, a moment when the future of energy was no longer a matter of debate. It was a matter of action, and the fight was far from over. The aftermath of the televised debate left the air buzzing with energy. The impact was immediate and undeniable. Within hours, headlines flooded the news, and social media exploded with reactions. People who had previously been skeptical of Elon Musk's vision were now seriously considering it. Support for clean energy was at an all-time high, and the petition calling for a nationwide transition to electric vehicles by 2035 saw a massive surge in signatures. Musk knew the battle wasn't over, but it was clear that the tide was turning in his favor. The public had spoken, and their message was loud and clear. They wanted a change. It was no longer just about Tesla or SpaceX. It was about a movement, a collective call to protect the future of the planet. The idea of electric vehicles and renewable energy wasn't just some abstract dream. It had become a tangible reality that millions of people now believed in. As the weeks went by, Musk's team worked tirelessly to maintain the momentum. Tesla continued to roll out new initiatives, including plans for a nationwide network of charging stations and even exploring ways to make solar energy more accessible to homes across the country. Meanwhile, the pressure on lawmakers was mounting. The oil lobby had fought hard, but the public outcry was too much to ignore. Musk had his allies in Congress, but even those who had initially opposed his plan were now reconsidering their stance. There was no denying the power of a grassroots movement that had grown larger than anyone had anticipated. The voters were speaking up, and they were demanding action. Then came the day that would change everything: the Senate vote. It had been an intense few days leading up to the vote, with Musk's team working behind the scenes to lobby senators, hold rallies, and continue pushing the petition. Musk himself had made countless calls to key figures in Washington, urging them to consider the long-term impact of their decisions. He had always believed in leading with conviction, but now it was more than just about being right. It was about securing a future that could no longer be ignored. On the morning of the vote, Musk sat in his office, surrounded by his closest advisors. They were watching the news coverage of the event unfold, holding their breath as the clock ticked closer to the moment of decision. The senators were taking their seats in the chamber, ready to cast their votes. Musk felt a knot form in his stomach. He knew that the outcome of this vote would shape the future of not just Tesla, but of the entire nation and the world. The vote was scheduled to take place late in the afternoon, and Musk knew that every vote counted. As the hours passed, he paced back and forth, rehearsing his final speech for the press conference that would follow, regardless of the outcome. He knew that the fight was far from over, even if the vote went in his favor. Finally, the moment arrived. The broadcast switched to the Senate chamber, where the final vote was being called. One by one, the senators stood up and cast their votes. Some voted in favor, others against, but it was clear that the margin was narrow. The atmosphere in the room was tense, and Musk's heart pounded in his chest. He watched the tally board carefully, hoping for the numbers to swing in his favor. And then it happened. The final vote was cast, and the result appeared on the screen. For the first time in history, the United States Senate had voted to approve a nationwide transition to electric vehicles and renewable energy sources by 2035. The bill passed, and the chamber erupted into applause. Musk sat back in his chair, stunned for a moment, before the full weight of the victory hit him. He had done it. Against all odds, against the powerful oil lobby, against the skeptics, the bill had passed. The world had just taken a giant leap forward. The news was broadcast around the world. The victory was not just Musk's, but the world's. It was a testament to the power of collective action, to the idea that change was possible when people came together and fought for what they believed in. The debate over electric vehicles was no longer a question of if, it was a question of when. Musk stood up from his desk, his face a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. He walked over to the window and looked out at the city below. It felt as though the entire world had shifted. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel the weight of what they had accomplished. But deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. The real work was only starting. In the days that followed, Musk was lauded as a hero by many and vilified by others. But he had expected this. He knew that change was never easy. There would always be those who fought against progress, who clung to the old ways of doing things. But now, Musk's vision was no longer a dream. It was the law of the land. And as the news reports and congratulatory messages poured in, Musk made one thing clear. This victory wasn't about him. It was about the future of humanity. It was about giving the planet a fighting chance. He had proven that even the most ambitious ideas could become reality. And as the world watched, Musk knew that this was just the beginning. There was still so much to be done, so many more hurdles to overcome. But now, with the support of millions and the backing of the Senate, the transition to a cleaner, greener future had officially begun. The future was electric. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?